The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain references that have puzzled Sumerologists for over a century. Among the thousands of administrative documents cataloguing grain shipments, labour assignments, and temple offerings, a specific category of text stands apart for their unusual content. These tablets, designated in the University of Pennsylvania's collection as the _0_describe systematic extraction operations for a material the Sumerians called KU.GI.MUSHIR, literally translated as _1_. The texts provide detailed accounting of mining operations, worker assignments, and processing procedures for this substance. Yet no archaeological evidence has ever confirmed what this material actually was, or where these extensive mining operations supposedly took place. Tablet WEM 58743, housed in the Iraq Museum's collection, contains the most detailed description of KU.GI.MUSHIR procurement protocols, written in archaic Sumerian script dating to approximately 3200 BC. The text describes quota systems requiring the delivery of specific quantities of this substance to temple complexes at Eridu, Nippur, and Uruk. The precision of these quotas, measured in units called sela that correspond to approximately 1 litre, suggests systematic collection on an industrial scale. Most significantly, the tablet indicates that this substance was not used for human purposes, but was specifically designated for sustaining the divine essence and maintaining the brilliance of those who descended from heaven. The language employed differs markedly from typical religious metaphor, using instead the dry administrative terminology characteristic of Sumerian economic documents. What makes these procurement records particularly intriguing is their correlation with archaeological evidence of extensive ancient mining operations across regions that align precisely with Sumerian trade networks. Modern geological surveys have identified abandoned mine shafts in southern Africa, the Caucasus Mountains, and the Sinai Peninsula that predate known Bronze Age mining activities by thousands of years. These ancient excavations show evidence of sophisticated extraction techniques and processing methods that exceed the documented capabilities of Neolithic populations. The timing, scale, and geographical distribution of these mysterious mining operations correspond exactly with the periods and locations referenced in the Sumerian metallic substance procurement texts. The evidence we're about to examine spans archaeological excavations across 3 continents, chemical analysis of ancient metallurgical sites, astronomical calculations preserved in temple records, and the systematic correlation between Sumerian administrative texts and physical evidence of industrial-scale resource extraction. The investigation reveals a pattern suggesting that what we've dismissed as mythology may actually represent carefully preserved records of technological operations conducted by beings the Sumerians themselves insisted were not human. The administrative archives from the Akur temple complex at Nippur contain over 300 tablets specifically dedicated to tracking the procurement, processing, and distribution of KU.GI.MUSHIR. These documents, spanning the period from approximately 3600 to 2800 BC, employ the same rigorous accounting methods used for tracking grain, livestock, and precious metals throughout Sumerian civilization. Tablet CBS 10,673 describes monthly delivery quotas of 48 asila of processed KU.GI.MUSHIR to the inner sanctum of the temple, accompanied by detailed records of the labor forces employed in its extraction and the geographical sources of the raw material. The procurement records demonstrate organizational sophistication that rivals modern supply chain management. Each tablet follows standardized formatting that includes the date of transaction, the source location of the material, the quantity delivered, the names of workers involved in extraction and transport, and the supervisory official responsible for quality verification. Tablet I, M62391, preserved in the Iraq Museum collection, specifies that KU.GI.MUSHIR deliveries originated from locations designated as the deep places of the Mountain of Cedar and the Red Earth beyond the Great Sea, geographical references that correspond to regions in modern Lebanon and southern Africa, respectively. The precision of these logistical records indicates systematic coordination across vast distances during periods when conventional archaeology assumes only localized trade networks existed. What distinguishes the KU.GI.MUSHIR records from ordinary commodity tracking is the specialized terminology employed for describing processing procedures and quality standards. Unlike tablets recording grain or metal transactions that use straightforward descriptive language, the KU.GI.MUSHIR texts employ technical vocabulary found nowhere else in Sumerian administrative literature. Terms like mushir.ker.gri, meaning that which brightens from the mountain, and zie.gin.dili, translated as single brilliant essence, suggest the material underwent complex refinement processes that transformed raw ore into purified compounds with specific properties. The texts describe multi-stage processing involving heating, chemical treatment with substances including cedar oil and mineral salts, and final purification procedures conducted exclusively within temple precincts under priestly supervision. The distribution protocols for processed KU.GI.MUSHIR reveal its extraordinary value and restricted access. Tablet V AT7823 indicates that unlike precious metals or gemstones that could be allocated for royal jewelry or temple decoration, KU.GI.MUSHIR was reserved exclusively for what the texts term sustaining the divine radiance of Anunnaki individuals. Distribution records specify exact quantities allocated to named divine beings, with Enki receiving the largest monthly allocation of 72 sila, followed by Enlil with 60 sila and Ninhursag with 48 sila. The consistency of these allocations across decades of records suggests biological necessity rather than ceremonial symbolism, implying that Anunnaki physiology required regular supplementation with substances extracted from Earth's geology. Quality control procedures described in the procurement tablets indicate sophisticated understanding of chemical properties and refinement techniques. Tablet CBS 14,207 details testing procedures for verifying KU.GI.MUSHIR. Purity, including visual inspection for specific color characteristics described as _quote_9. weight to volume ratio measurements, button and reaction testing involving exposure to substances including vinegar, cedar oil, and what the text calls quote, _10, likely referring to mineral-rich groundwater. Materials failing these quality standards were rejected and returned for additional processing, with severe penalties imposed on workers who delivered substandard products. The sophistication of these quality assurance protocols exceeds what should have been possible for Bronze Age metallurgy and suggests direction by individuals with advanced chemical knowledge. The geographical sources documented in the procurement records correlate precisely with locations of extensive prehistoric mining operations discovered through modern archaeological surveys. Tablets from the reign of Shulgi around 2090 BC describe procurement expeditions to quote, 11, and quote, 12, locations. Scholars identify with the Indus Valley region and areas in eastern Africa. These same regions contain archaeological evidence of systematic mining activities during the 3rd millennium BC that targeted specific ore deposits containing unusual mineral combinations. The correlation between textual references and physical mining evidence suggests the Sumerian records document actual resource extraction operations rather than mythological constructs. Archaeological surveys conducted in the Ngwenya region of Swaziland have documented extensive prehistoric mining operations that date to approximately 43,000 years ago, based on radiocarbon analysis of charcoal deposits found within the mine shafts. These excavations, first identified by mining geologist Adrian Boshier in 1970, extend over several square kilometers and show evidence of systematic ore extraction using techniques that required sophisticated understanding of geological formations. The mines targeted specific mineral veins containing unusual concentrations of hematite combined with trace elements including gold, copper, and unknown metallic compounds that resist conventional chemical analysis. The Ngwenya mines demonstrate engineering capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of prehistoric human technological development. The excavations follow specific ore veins deep into mountainsides using shaft and tunnel configurations that optimize extraction efficiency while minimizing structural collapse risk. Survey measurements conducted by the University of Johannesburg archaeological team in 2007 revealed that the main shaft system extends over 20 meters below the original surface level, with lateral tunnels branching at precisely calculated angles to follow mineral deposits. The consistency of tunnel dimensions averaging 1.2 meters in height and 0.9 meters in width indicates standardized excavation protocols rather than opportunistic digging, suggesting systematic planning and execution by organized labor forces operating under technical supervision. Dating analysis of the Ngwenya operations has produced results that profoundly challenge accepted timelines of human technological capability. Radiocarbon analysis of charcoal samples from multiple locations within the mine complex, conducted by the Quaternary Dating Research Unit at Pretoria, yielded dates ranging from 43,000 to 35,000 years before present, placing the mining activities during the Middle Stone Age when conventional archaeology assumes southern African populations consisted exclusively of hunter-gatherers lacking metallurgical knowledge. Additional luminescence dating of sediments disturbed during mining operations confirm these ancient dates, eliminating the possibility of contamination or sample mixing with more recent materials. The mineral composition targeted by these prehistoric miners reveals selection criteria based on properties beyond simple metal content. Geological analysis of the ore veins worked at Ngwenya shows they contain hematite iron oxide as the primary component, but with unusual concentrations of trace elements, including gold particles averaging 3 parts per million, copper compounds at approximately 1%, and unidentified metallic complexes that produce anomalous results during standard chemical assays. Spectrographic analysis conducted by the Council for Geoscience identified spectral signatures that do not match any catalogued mineral compounds, suggesting the ore contains elements or element combinations not recognized by conventional geology. The deliberate targeting of these specific unusual ore bodies, rather than more accessible deposits containing higher percentages of conventional metals, indicates the miners sought materials with properties beyond basic iron or copper content. Excavation techniques employed at Ngwenya demonstrate knowledge of geological principles including fault line identification or body mapping, and structural engineering for maintaining shaft stability. The mine entrances are positioned at locations where natural geological features including rock fractures and weathering patterns indicated the presence of subsurface mineral deposits, suggesting the miners possessed diagnostic capabilities for identifying ore bodies without drilling or extensive surface prospecting. Support structures within the tunnels include stone pillars left in place during excavation and timber shoring systems that prevented collapse while enabling maximum ore extraction. The sophistication of these structural engineering solutions exceeds the documented capabilities of Stone Age populations and suggests either dramatically underestimated prehistoric human abilities or guidance by individuals with advanced geological and engineering knowledge. Tool marks preserved on the mine walls reveal extraction methods that combined stone implement usage with techniques that remain unexplained by conventional archaeology. Analysis of cut marks on the rock surfaces shows patterns consistent with systematic chiseling and prying using hard stone tools, but also includes smooth grooves and precisely angled cuts that do not match the working characteristics of known stone tool types. Some surfaces show evidence of exposure to extreme heat that fractured the rock along specific planes, suggesting the possible use of thermal extraction techniques involving controlled fire application to weaken rock structures before mechanical removal. The combination of conventional and unconventional extraction methods indicates experimental approaches to solving technical challenges or application of diverse techniques suited to different geological conditions encountered during mining operations. Sumerian cosmological texts consistently describe Enki's domain as the Abzu, traditionally translated as freshwater ocean beneath the earth, but more accurately understood as source of deep knowledge and materials. Cuneiform tablets from Eridu specifically associate the Abzu with locations where essential materials were extracted from beneath the Earth's surface. Tablet VAT 9555 describes Enki as _15_ and credits him with establishing the first extraction operations that would provide materials necessary for divine sustenance. The Eridu texts provide detailed descriptions of the Abzu that reveal it encompasses both geographical locations and conceptual domains relating to subterranean resource extraction. The Sumerian term ab.zu derives from roots meaning, quote, 16 or, quote, 17, suggesting the Abzu represents not merely mythological underworld regions, but actual deep earth environments containing essential materials. Tablet CBS 15942 describes Enki's establishment of the house of the Abzu at Eridu, which archaeological excavations have confirmed as the location of the oldest temple complex in Mesopotamia, dating to approximately 5200 BC. The temple's foundation extends unusually deep into the earth, with underground chambers reaching the water table, creating physical connection to subsurface environments that the texts associate with Enki's domain. References to the Abzu in economic and administrative texts reveal its function extended beyond religious symbolism to include practical resource management. Tablet BM 54321 contains accounting records for materials brought forth from the Abzu, including metals, minerals, and what the text describes as essences of the deep earth that were processed in temple workshops. The text specifies that these materials arrived at Eridu from distant locations designated as Abzu outposts, in regions corresponding to modern Oman, Eastern Africa, and the Caucasus Mountains. This network of Abzu-associated sites correlates precisely with locations of ancient mining operations, suggesting that Enki's domain encompassed a coordinated system of resource extraction facilities rather than a single mythological location. The mythology surrounding Enki consistently portrays him as possessing specialized knowledge of earth sciences including geology, metallurgy, and chemical processing. The text known as quote 22 describes how Enki quote 23 and quote 24 capabilities that suggest advanced understanding of geological survey techniques and mineral prospecting. These descriptions take on practical significance when correlated with archaeological evidence showing that ancient Mesopotamian mining operations successfully located and extracted specific mineral deposits requiring geological expertise to identify. The texts credit Enki with teaching humans the extraction and processing techniques necessary for obtaining materials from deep earth sources, positioning him as the divine patron of mining and metallurgical technologies. Architectural features of the Eridu temple complex reveal sophisticated understanding of hydrology and subterranean engineering that supports the interpretation of the Abzu as representing actual underground resource systems. Excavations conducted by Fuad Safar between 1946 and 1949 uncovered elaborate systems of underground channels, cisterns, and chambers that accessed and controlled groundwater flowing beneath the temple. These hydraulic installations demonstrate engineering knowledge, including precise gradient calculations for water flow, filtration systems for water purification, and structural designs that prevented flooding while maintaining access to subterranean water sources. The technical sophistication of these underground systems parallels engineering requirements for managing water infiltration in deep mining operations, suggesting that temple architecture incorporated knowledge derived from mining experience. The association between Enki's Abzu domain and mining operations receives additional support from analysis of temple workshop facilities at Eridu and other Mesopotamian sites associated with Enki worship. Archaeological investigation of workshop areas has uncovered evidence of advanced metallurgical activities, including ore processing, metal refining, and production of specialized alloys with compositions that exceed the documented capabilities of Bronze Age metallurgy. Chemical analysis of slag deposits from these workshops reveals processing temperatures and chemical treatments similar to those documented at ancient mining sites, indicating that temple facilities served as centers for refining and processing materials extracted from distant mining operations. The concentration of these sophisticated metallurgical capabilities at temples dedicated to Enki reinforces the connection between this deity and systematic resource extraction from deep earth sources. Chemical analysis of slag deposits discovered at the Timna Valley mining complex in southern Israel has revealed evidence of sophisticated metallurgical processes that operated during the 4th millennium BC. The slag composition indicates processing temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees Celsius, far higher than necessary for copper smelting alone. Spectrographic analysis conducted by the Institute for Archaeometallurgical Studies identified trace elements in these slag deposits that match no known ancient metallurgical processes, including unusual concentrations of monoatomic gold compounds and unidentified transition metal complexes. The Timna Valley installations represent the most extensively studied ancient metallurgical site in the Middle East, with continuous archaeological investigation since the 1930s, providing comprehensive documentation of mining and processing technologies employed over millennia. This site contains evidence of systematic copper extraction dating from the Chalcolithic period around 4500 BC through the Roman period, but the most enigmatic remains date to the earliest operational phases, when processing techniques demonstrate capabilities that appear suddenly in the archaeological record without apparent developmental stages. Excavations directed by Benno Rothenberg between 1964 and 1990 uncovered smelting installations, ore processing facilities, and worker settlements that reveal industrial-scale operations requiring sophisticated organizational and technical capabilities. Analysis of the earliest slag deposits from Timneh reveals anomalies that have puzzled archaeometallurgists for decades. Standard copper smelting during the Chalcolithic period typically produced slag with relatively simple chemical compositions dominated by iron oxide, silica, and copper compounds, with processing temperatures rarely exceeding 900 degrees Celsius. However, slag samples from the deepest stratigraphic levels at Timna show evidence of processing temperatures reaching 1200 to 1300 degrees Celsius, based on the presence of fully vitrified silicates and completely oxidized iron compounds that only form at extreme temperatures. The technology required to achieve and maintain such temperatures during the 5th millennium BC should not have existed according to conventional models of metallurgical development, yet the physical evidence confirms these advanced capabilities. The chemical composition of the Timna slag reveals the processing targeted more than simple copper extraction. Spectrographic analysis using inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry identified trace elements present in concentrations and combinations that indicate intentional processing rather than incidental contamination. Gold content in the slag averages between 5 and 15 parts per million, far higher than typical background levels in copper ore, suggesting the processing deliberately extracted gold along with copper. More significantly, the gold exists partially in monoatomic form rather than standard metallic state, a configuration requiring specific chemical treatments and temperature protocols to achieve. Modern laboratories producing monoatomic gold use techniques involving repeated thermal cycling, chemical dissolution with acids, and precipitation with alkali solutions, procedures that appear to match residue patterns found in the ancient slag deposits. Unidentified transition metal complexes detected through X-ray fluorescence analysis present the most perplexing aspect of the Timna slag composition. These compounds produce spectral signatures that do not match any catalogued minerals or synthetic compounds, suggesting either previously unknown naturally occurring minerals or artificially synthesized materials created through advanced chemical processes. The complexes contain combinations of platinum group elements, including rhodium and iridium mixed with gold and copper, in ratios that do not occur in natural ore deposits. The presence of these exotic metal combinations indicates either remarkably sophisticated or selection processes that identified and processed extremely rare mineral deposits, or deliberate synthesis of specific compounds through metallurgical techniques far more advanced than standard Bronze Age capabilities. The processing facilities at Timna include features that suggest knowledge of advanced chemical engineering principles. Furnace designs incorporate multiple chambers with precisely controlled airflow systems that enable differential temperature management in different processing zones. These multi-chamber furnaces allowed simultaneous execution of different metallurgical processes, including ore roasting, smelting, and refining that would optimize metal recovery while enabling production of specific chemical compounds. Crucible fragments recovered from processing areas show evidence of specialized ceramic compositions designed to withstand extreme temperatures while remaining chemically inert to prevent contamination of processed materials. The sophistication of these furnace designs and refractory materials exceeds documented Chalcolithic technological capabilities by substantial margins. Worker settlement analysis at Timna reveals organizational systems for managing metallurgical operations that required administrative sophistication and resource coordination across extensive geographical areas. Settlement layouts include distinct residential zones, administrative buildings, storage facilities, and workshop areas arranged according to functional requirements that optimize workflow and material handling. Administrative structures contain remains of record-keeping materials including clay ceilings and notational marks that indicate systematic tracking of production outputs, resource allocation, and worker assignments. The scale and complexity of these organizational systems suggest direction by individuals with advanced understanding of industrial management and metallurgical supervision. The Sumerian text known as Enki and the World Order contains explicit references to the Anunnaki's need for specific terrestrial materials to maintain their physiological functioning. The text describes how quote 26 and how quote 27. This description suggests biological rather than technological dependence, implying that the Anunnaki required specific substances found in Earth's geology for maintaining their metabolic processes during extended terrestrial residence. The physiological requirements described in Enki and the World Order receive detailed elaboration in medical texts from the Ninurta temple archives at Nippur. Tablet CBS 19,874 describes symptoms experienced by Anunnaki individuals deprived of regular KU.GI.MUSHIR supplementation, including diminishment of their characteristic luminescence, reduction in physical strength and stamina, impairment of cognitive functions, and eventual deterioration described as the fading of divine essence. The systematic documentation of these symptoms using clinical observational language rather than metaphorical religious terminology suggests the text preserves genuine medical knowledge regarding physiological conditions affecting the Anunnaki population during their terrestrial residence. The text specifies treatment protocols involving administration of processed KU.GI.MUSHIR that would reverse the symptoms of deprivation and restore normal functioning. Tablet VAT 12,391 describes preparation procedures requiring dissolution of purified KU.GI.MUSHIR in specific liquids including honey, wine, and cedar oil, followed by ritual consumption during particular astronomical alignments that would enhance absorption and effectiveness. The precision of these preparation instructions, including exact quantities measured in Seeler units, specific mixing sequences, and timing requirements coordinated with planetary positions, indicate standardized medical protocols rather than symbolic religious practices. The texts indicate that regular consumption of these preparations maintained Anunnaki health and vitality during their extended presence on Earth. References to the divine radiance or melamu that distinguished Anunnaki from humans appear throughout Mesopotamian literature as defining characteristics requiring specific materials to maintain. The hymn to Inanna describes her radiance as brightness that makes the mountains bow, and attributes this luminescence to the essence she draws from the deep earth places. Similar descriptions appear for other Anunnaki figures, consistently associating their supernatural radiance with consumption of substances extracted from terrestrial geological sources. Modern interpretation of these descriptions has typically treated the divine radiance as purely metaphorical, representing power or majesty. But the medical texts documenting its diminishment when deprived of specific materials suggest the luminescence represented actual physiological characteristics. The biological interpretation of Anunnaki resource requirements finds support in comparative analysis, with extremophile organisms discovered in deep earth environments during modern geological surveys, bacterial species recovered from gold mines in South Africa at depths exceeding 3 kilometers, demonstrate metabolic pathways that utilize metals, including gold and platinum group elements, as electron donors in energy production processes. These organisms produce bioluminescent compounds as metabolic byproducts, creating visible glow detectable under low-light conditions. The existence of terrestrial life forms with gold-dependent metabolism and luminescent characteristics provides biological parallels to the Anunnaki requirements described in Sumerian texts, suggesting that similar biochemistries might enable organisms to utilize specific metallic substances for maintaining physiological functions. The geographical distribution of resource extraction sites documented in Sumerian procurement records correlates with locations of unusual geological formations containing rare element concentrations that would provide the specific materials Anunnaki physiology apparently required. Tablet BEM 67,432 lists procurement sources including the fire mountains beyond the Eastern Sea, corresponding to volcanic regions in the Caucasus, where hydrothermal activity concentrates platinum group elements. The red lands of the Southern Ocean, referring to hematite-rich regions in southern Africa, and the Cedar Mountains where the bright water flows, indicating mineralized spring areas in Lebanon and Syria. Each of these locations contains geological features that concentrate specific rare elements through natural processes including volcanic activity, hydrothermal circulation, and sedimentary concentration mechanisms. The systematic targeting of these geologically distinct locations indicates selection based on detailed knowledge of element distributions and geological processes. Human creation narratives preserved in the Atrahasis Epic and related texts take on new significance when examined as documentation of genetic engineering programs designed to produce workers capable of extracting and processing the materials Anunnaki required. The texts describe how Enki and Ninhursag modified primitive humans to create beings with enhanced intelligence, physical endurance, and specific physiological adaptations that enabled survival in mining environments. The epic specifies that humans were designed to bear the toil the gods could not endure, and to bring forth from the deep earth the essences required for divine sustenance. This explicit statement of purpose suggests human genetic modification served practical resource extraction requirements, rather than general labor needs, positioning humans as specialized biological equipment designed for obtaining specific materials from challenging environments. The Atrahasis Epic preserves detailed accounts of what it terms the Igi Rebellion, when lesser divine beings refused to continue the exhausting labor of extracting materials from deep earth mines. Tablet B M78,941 describes how, for 40 years, the Igi bore the toil, digging the earth, carrying baskets of stone, bringing forth the shining substance from the deep places. The text indicates that this labor involved such extreme conditions that the Igi eventually refused to continue, precipitating a crisis that led to the creation of humans specifically designed for performing this mining labor. The rebellion narrative provides unprecedented detail about working conditions in the ancient mining operations and the organizational hierarchy that governed Anunnaki resource extraction activities. The epic describes how 600 Igigi were assigned to mining operations under the supervision of Anunnaki administrators, including Enlil, who directed overall operations, and Anugi, who served as chief of excavations. The text specifies that mining work proceeded continuously, with shifts rotating between surface processing facilities and underground extraction zones, requiring the Igigi to spend extended periods in subterranean environments that the epic characterizes as places where no light reaches and depths where the earth's heat burns. The physical demands of this labor, combined with psychological stress of prolonged underground confinement, created conditions that eventually proved unsustainable, even for beings described elsewhere as possessing capabilities far exceeding normal human limits. The specific grievances articulated by the rebelling Igigi reveal that their protest focused not merely on difficult working conditions, but on what they perceived as unjust labor allocation within the Anunnaki hierarchy. Tablet K 3627 preserves speeches delivered by KU.GI.MUSHIR representatives who confronted Enlil demanding relief from mining duties. These speakers argue that we dig the earth while the Great Ones rest in comfort, and question why those who receive the bright substance do not share the burden of bringing it forth. These statements indicate the Igigi understood they were extracting materials that sustained other Anunnaki, but received inadequate compensation or recognition for their dangerous labor. The sophistication of these labor grievances and the organized nature of the work stoppage suggest the Iga possess social and political consciousness, enabling collective action against perceived exploitation. The rebellion's resolution through human creation represents a technological solution to what the texts frame as a labor management crisis. Rather than negotiating with the KU.GI or redistributing labor assignments among the Anunnaki hierarchy, Enlil and the Divine Council decided to engineer an entirely new workforce specifically designed for mining operations. The epic describes urgent consultations among senior Anunnaki, including Anu, Enlil, and Enki, to devise a solution that would resume material extraction while preventing future labor disruptions. The decision to create humans emerged from these deliberations as the optimal approach, combining Enki's genetic engineering expertise with Ninhursag's biological manipulation capabilities to produce workers who would accept mining labor without the capacity for organized resistance that characterized the Igigi rebellion. The timeline provided in the Atrahasis Epic for the Igigi labor period offers chronological framework for dating the transition from divine to human mining workforce. The text specifies that 40 years of Igigi labor preceded the rebellion, followed by intensive efforts to create viable human workers that required additional time for genetic development and population expansion before humans could fully replace divine miners. If the KU.GI operations corresponded to the earliest mining evidence from sites like Ngwenya dating to approximately 43,000 years ago, the transition to human labor would have occurred around 42,000 years before present, coinciding with the appearance of anatomically modern humans in archaeological records from Africa and the Middle East. This correlation suggests the Atrahasis chronology may preserve actual historical memory of the period when human beings first emerged as a distinct species designed for specific labor functions. The subsequent deployment of humans to mining operations receives documentation in administrative texts that track the expansion of extraction activities following successful human workforce development. Tablet CBS 21496 describes the allocation of human labor forces to mining sites across multiple geographical regions, with population counts indicating that thousands of workers were deployed to individual mining complexes. The text specifies training procedures for new workers, including instruction in ore identification, extraction techniques, processing methods, and safety protocols for underground operations. The systematic nature of this workforce management and the rapid expansion of mining activities following human deployment suggest that human creation successfully resolved the labor crisis precipitated by the KU.GI.MUSHIR rebellion. The Atrahasis Epic provides explicit details about the genetic engineering procedures employed by Enki and Ninhursag to create humans capable of surviving the harsh conditions of deep earth mining. The text describes how, quote, 43 to create beings that possess sufficient intelligence to follow complex instructions while remaining physically capable of sustained labor in underground environments. Significantly, the epic indicates that humans were specifically designed to extract the materials the Anunnaki required, with enhanced tolerance for subterranean conditions and resistance to the toxic substances encountered during mining operations. The creation procedure described in the epic combines symbolic language with surprisingly specific technical details that suggest actual genetic engineering processes rather than purely mythological creation narratives. The text identifies the divine individual whose blood provided genetic material as We'ila, described as possessing, quote, 44 and special knowledge, as suggesting selection based on cognitive capabilities that would be transferred to human creations. The mixing of this genetic material with _45_ likely represents a metaphorical description of biological substrate or cellular medium used in the engineering process, with the clay symbolizing the earthly material basis for biological life. The epic specifies that Ninhursag performed this mixing within a _46_ using procedures that required 14 separate preparations, 7 designated for creating males and 7 for females, indicating standardized protocols for producing viable human specimens. The gestation and development procedures described in the epic reveal sophisticated understanding of biological reproduction and embryonic development. The text indicates that each of the 14 prepared specimens was implanted into birth goddesses, who would gestate the proto-humans for specified periods before bringing them forth. This artificial gestation process using surrogate mothers suggests techniques analogous to modern in vitro fertilization and surrogacy, implying the Anunnaki possessed advanced reproductive technologies. The epic specifies a gestation period of _47_ matching the duration of human pregnancy, and suggesting the text preserves accurate biological information. Upon emergence, the created humans required additional training and development before deployment to mining operations, indicating recognition that biological maturation alone was insufficient for producing effective workers. The specific capabilities engineered into humans reveal design optimization for mining labor requirements. The epic describes humans as possessing _48, combined with _49, indicating intentional balance between physical capabilities and cognitive functions. Unlike the Igigi, who possessed intelligence sufficient to organize collective resistance, humans were designed with cognitive abilities calibrated to enable task performance, while preventing the development of political consciousness that could threaten labor discipline. The text also references enhanced physiological tolerance for underground environments, including resistance to _50_ and ability to _51_ likely referring to toxic gases encountered in mines and heavy metal exposure from ore processing. Archaeological evidence supports the interpretation that early human populations concentrated in regions associated with ancient mining operations, consistent with the epic's claim that humans were created specifically for resource extraction labor. Analysis of early human settlement patterns reveals clustering around geological formations containing valuable mineral deposits, including the gold-bearing regions of southern Africa, copper-rich areas of the Middle East, and tin sources in Central Asia and Southeast Asia. The correlation between early human population centers and mining resource locations exceeds what random distribution would predict, suggesting deliberate population placement according to resource extraction requirements rather than purely environmental factors like water availability or game abundance. Skeletal analysis of early human remains from mining regions reveals physiological adaptations consistent with extended underground labor. Populations from southern African sites dating to the late Pleistocene show increased bone density in load-bearing skeletal elements, suggesting adaptation to carrying heavy burdens over extended periods. Dental wear patterns indicate diets high in silica and mineral particles consistent with consumption of food in dusty mining environments. Most significantly, genetic analysis reveals enhanced expression of genes associated with heavy metal detoxification and tolerance for low oxygen environments, adaptations that would provide selective advantages specifically in mining contexts. These physiological characteristics support the Atrahasis claim that humans were biologically optimized for mining labor through deliberate genetic engineering rather than natural selection processes. The transition from divine to human mining labor enabled massive expansion of resource extraction operations as documented in the archaeological record. Sites across Africa, Asia, and Europe show dramatic increases in mining activity beginning approximately 40,000 years ago, coinciding with the appearance of anatomically modern humans in these regions. The scale of these expanded operations far exceeded anything the limited KU.GI.MUSHIR workforce could have achieved, suggesting that human population growth rapidly provided labor resources, enabling exploitation of mineral deposits that were previously inaccessible due to workforce limitations. The global distribution of these simultaneous mining expansions indicates coordinated development directed by Anunnaki administrators who deployed human workers according to systematic resource extraction plans. Archaeological evidence of extensive prehistoric mining operations extends far beyond Africa and the Middle East to encompass sites on every inhabited continent. Surveys of the Great Lakes copper region in North America have documented the removal of over 500,000 tons of copper during the period between 3500 and 1200 BC, using techniques that required sophisticated geological knowledge and organizational capabilities. Similarly, ancient mining operations in Australia, South America, and Southeast Asia show evidence of systematic resource extraction during periods when conventional archaeology assumes only primitive hunter-gatherer societies existed. The Great Lakes copper mining complex represents one of the most extensive prehistoric metallurgical operations ever documented, with evidence of systematic extraction spanning over 2,000 years and affecting hundreds of square kilometers across Michigan's Upper Peninsula and Isle Royale. Geological surveys conducted by the Michigan Geological Survey beginning in the 1850s documented thousands of ancient mining pits targeting native copper deposits exposed in basalt formations along the Cuneiform Peninsula. These excavations removed enormous quantities of copper using techniques that combined fire setting to fracture rock with systematic extraction using stone hammers and copper chisels recovered from mining sites. Estimates of total copper extraction range from 500,000 to 1.5 million tons based on the volume of rock removed and the copper content of the mined formations. The technical sophistication of Great Lakes mining operations challenges conventional assumptions about the capabilities of prehistoric North American populations. The miners demonstrated detailed geological knowledge enabling identification of the richest copper deposits within extensive basalt formations where copper content varies dramatically across short distances. Excavation techniques show systematic approaches to removing overburden following copper veins through solid rock and extracting metal with minimal waste of labor or resources. Some mining pits extend over 10 meters deep with evidence of timber shoring systems and drainage installations that prevented flooding and collapse. The engineering knowledge required for these deep excavations exceeds the documented capabilities of the Archaic period populations conventionally credited with the mining, suggesting either dramatically underestimated indigenous capabilities or external technical guidance. The destination of the enormous copper quantities extracted from the Great Lakes region remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. Despite evidence of massive copper removal, relatively few copper artifacts from the same period appear in North American archaeological contexts. The quantities of copper tools, weapons, and ornaments recovered from Archaic and Woodland period sites total perhaps a few thousand tons at most, leaving hundreds of thousands of tons of extracted copper unaccounted for in the archaeological record. This massive discrepancy suggests the copper was exported to distant locations rather than consumed locally, implying transoceanic trade networks capable of moving bulk commodities across vast distances during prehistoric periods. chemical fingerprinting of Bronze Age copper artifacts from Europe and the Mediterranean using lead isotope analysis has identified sources matching Great Lakes copper deposits, providing direct evidence for transatlantic trade during the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC. Studies conducted by the Deutsches Bergbau Museum analysed copper artifacts from Bronze Age sites in Britain, Scandinavia, and the Mediterranean, identifying isotopic signatures corresponding to Lake Superior native copper, rather than European copper sources. The presence of Great Lakes copper in European Bronze Age contexts demonstrates that prehistoric maritime capabilities enabled bulk commodity transport across the Atlantic Ocean, requiring navigation technology and organizational systems far more sophisticated than conventional models acknowledge. Similar patterns of extensive prehistoric mining, followed by mysterious copper disappearance, appear at sites across South America. The ancient copper mines of the Atacama Desert in Chile show evidence of systematic extraction beginning around 3000 BC, with operations continuing for over 2 millennia. Archaeological surveys have documented hundreds of mining sites targeting copper oxide deposits using techniques similar to those employed in the Great Lakes region. Estimates of total copper extraction from Atacama mines range from tens to hundreds of thousands of tons based on the scale of ancient excavations. As with the Great Lakes copper, the destination of this massive metal production remains unclear, with local artifact assemblages accounting for only small fractions of the extracted quantities. Australian Aboriginal mining operations demonstrate comparable sophistication and scale in regions far removed from conventional centres of ancient metallurgical development. Surveys of the Pilbara region in Western Australia have identified extensive prehistoric excavations targeting hematite deposits used for ochre pigment production. While conventional interpretation frames these operations as simple pigment gathering, the scale and technical sophistication of the excavations suggest more complex purposes. Some mining pits extend over 15 meters deep with evidence of systematic ore selection and processing that exceeds requirements for basic pigment production. Chemical analysis of hematite from these sites reveals unusual trace element compositions similar to the South African deposits targeted by the Ngwenya operations, suggesting selection based on properties beyond simple iron oxide content. Southeast Asian tin mining provides additional evidence for prehistoric resource extraction on industrial scales. Archaeological investigations in Thailand and Malaysia have documented ancient tin mining operations dating to the 3rd millennium BC that targeted specific cassiterite deposits using hydraulic mining techniques requiring sophisticated understanding of water management and ore processing. These operations produced tin that was exported across maritime trade networks to supply bronze production in distant regions, including Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean. The logistics required for coordinating tin extraction, processing, and long-distance export during the Bronze Age demonstrate organizational capabilities and geographical knowledge far exceeding conventional expectations for prehistoric Southeast Asian societies. The global distribution of these sophisticated prehistoric mining operations correlates with the procurement networks documented in Mesopotamian administrative texts. Cuneiform tablets describing material sources for KU.GI.MUSHIR and other essential substances reference locations across Africa, Asia, and regions beyond the Great Western Ocean that correspond to the Americas. The consistency of mining techniques across these geographically dispersed sites suggests common technical knowledge and coordinated development rather than independent invention, supporting interpretations that attribute the global mining expansion to direction by Anunnaki administrators managing worldwide resource extraction systems. Recent excavations in the Greater Caucasus Mountains have uncovered extensive mining installations dating to the 4th millennium BC that demonstrate engineering sophistication far exceeding contemporary capabilities. The Sakdrisi gold mine in Georgia contains shaft systems extending over 200 meters into mountainsides, supported by sophisticated timber frameworks that prevented collapse while enabling the extraction of ore from deep veins. The scale of these operations and the precision of the excavation techniques suggest direction by individuals with advanced geological and engineering knowledge. The Sakdrisi mining complex represents the oldest known gold mine in the world, with radiocarbon dating of organic materials from mine contexts producing dates ranging from 3700 to 3300 BC. Excavations conducted by the Georgian National Museum between 2009 and 2014 revealed extensive underground workings including main access shafts, lateral galleries following gold-bearing quartz veins, and vertical ventilation shafts that maintained air circulation in deep workings. The total extent of underground excavations exceeds 5,000 square meters across multiple levels descending over 40 meters below the original surface. The systematic layout of these workings and the technical precision of the excavation work indicate planning and execution by experienced mining engineers working according to comprehensive extraction strategies. The timber support systems within Sakdrisi demonstrate advanced understanding of structural engineering principles and material science. Support frameworks include vertical posts, horizontal beams, and diagonal bracing members assembled using mortise and tenon joinery that created rigid structural frames capable of withstanding tremendous geological pressures. Wood species selection shows sophisticated knowledge of material properties, with oak used for primary load-bearing members due to its high strength and resistance to compression, while pine served for lighter secondary supports, where weight reduction was advantageous. The timber members show evidence of deliberate treatment with natural preservatives including cedar oil and mineral salts that extended their structural lifespan in the humid underground environment. The engineering sophistication of these support systems exceeds anything documented from contemporary Chalcolithic societies and suggests access to accumulated knowledge from extensive mining experience. Ore processing facilities associated with Sakdrisi reveal advanced metallurgical capabilities, including techniques for liberating gold from quartz, host rock, and concentrating gold particles for smelting. Processing areas contain stone mortars and grinding surfaces where ore was mechanically crushed to powder, followed by water-based separation techniques that exploited density differences between gold and gangue minerals. Evidence includes sluice channels with precisely calculated gradients for optimal particle separation and collection basins, where concentrated gold sands accumulated for final processing. Chemical analysis of processing area sediments reveals traces of mercury compounds, suggesting amalgamation techniques were employed to enhance gold recovery, a sophisticated metallurgical procedure not conventionally attributed to Chalcolithic metallurgists. The geological knowledge demonstrated by Sakdrisi miners indicates advanced understanding of ore deposit formation and the ability to predict subsurface ore body extent from surface observations. The mine workings precisely follow gold-bearing quartz veins that vary in thickness from a few centimeters to over half a meter, maintaining contact with mineralized zones through complex three-dimensional geometries as the veins dip, strike, and pinch through the host rock. This ability to track irregular ore bodies through underground excavation requires geological expertise, including understanding of structural controls on mineralization and the capacity to interpret limited exposure data to predict unexposed ore positions. The consistent success of Sakdrisi miners in following productive ore zones with minimal waste excavation indicates either remarkable skill developed through extensive experience or access to prospecting technologies that enabled subsurface ore body visualization. Labor organization for Sakdrisi operations reveals sophisticated workforce management systems, including specialized task assignments, hierarchical supervision structures, and support services for maintaining worker health and productivity. Archaeological evidence from worker settlement areas includes residential structures sized for housing mining crews, food preparation facilities capable of feeding large populations, and administrative buildings where supervisors coordinated operations and maintained production records. The settlement layout and architectural features parallel those found at other ancient mining sites, including Timna and the Great Lakes copper mines, suggesting standardized approaches to mining camp organization that were implemented across geographically dispersed operations. The timing of Sakdrisi operations corresponds with the period of maximum Anunnaki resource extraction documented in Mesopotamian administrative texts. Cuneiform tablets from the Uruk period describe procurement of gold and other materials from the mountains of Arata, a location scholars increasingly identify with the Caucasus region, where Sakdrisi is located. The quantities of gold referenced in these procurement records align with the production capacity suggested by the scale of Sakdrisi excavations, supporting correlations between textual documentation and archaeological evidence. The sophisticated engineering evident at Sakdrisi and the coordination with Mesopotamian procurement networks indicates this complex operated as a component of the integrated resource extraction system managed by Anunnaki administrators. Cuneiform astronomical texts from Babylon preserve calculations indicating that major mining operations were scheduled according to specific celestial alignments that would optimize what the texts describe as the potency of extracted essences. Tablet BM 45,789 contains detailed ephemerides showing the positions of planets, and specific stars during extraction operations, suggesting that the Anunnaki believed celestial configurations affected the properties or availability of the substances they sought. The precision of these astronomical calculations and their correlation with documented mining activities indicates systematic coordination between celestial observation and resource extraction. The astronomical timing protocols for mining operations receive detailed documentation in texts from the temple archives at Babylon and Uruk. These tablets describe optimal celestial conditions for initiating new excavations, processing ore, and conducting final purification of extracted materials. Tablet VAT 18,234 specifies that excavation of new shafts should commence when the Bull of Heaven stands at the eastern gate, and the Bright One walks the path of the Watchers, astronomical references corresponding to specific positions of the Pleiades star cluster and the planet Venus. The text indicates these conditions occurred during particular months of the year and required astronomical calculations to determine precise timing, suggesting mining supervisors employed professional astronomers to optimize operational schedules. The relationship between celestial configurations and material properties receives theoretical explanation in texts describing the nature of terrestrial substances and their connections to cosmic forces. Babylonian cosmological texts describe how all things of earth draw their essence from the lights of heaven, and how the power sleeping in stone awakens when the stars stand in proper array. These concepts suggest the Anunnaki understood material properties as influenced by celestial radiation or other cosmic forces that varied according to astronomical cycles. Modern physics recognizes that cosmic ray flux, solar radiation, and gravitational fields do affect physical and chemical processes at fundamental levels, providing scientific framework for understanding how astronomical conditions might influence material properties as ancient texts claimed. Processing operations show particularly strong correlation with astronomical timing, according to the operational protocols preserved in temple texts. Tablet K 9876 describes procedures for smelting and refining KU.GI.MUSHIR that specify operations must occur during specific lunar phases when particular planetary configurations enhanced processing efficiency. The text indicates that material processed during optimal astronomical conditions demonstrated enhanced brightness and potency, characteristics that were verified through testing procedures before distribution to Anunnaki recipients. The systematic nature of these astronomical timing requirements and their documentation in technical operational manuals suggest they derived from empirical observations of actual effects rather than purely symbolic religious practices. Archaeological evidence from mining sites supports the implementation of astronomical timing protocols through discoveries of astronomical observation facilities integrated into mining complexes. Excavations at several ancient mining sites, including Sakdrisi and Timna, have uncovered stone platforms with precise stellar alignments that served as observation stations for tracking celestial phenomena. These installations include sightlines oriented towards specific stellar rising or setting positions and incorporate marker stones that indicate significant astronomical events including solstices, equinoxes, and planetary conjunctions. The integration of these astronomical facilities within mining complexes demonstrates that celestial observation constituted essential operational infrastructure rather than separate religious activity. The precision of astronomical calculations preserved in the mining operation text exceeds the accuracy levels typically attributed to ancient Babylonian astronomy. Planetary position predictions in the operational texts achieve accuracy levels within 1 degree across multi-year periods, requiring sophisticated mathematical models and extensive observational databases. The texts employ advanced computational techniques including linear interpolation methods and periodic functions for calculating planetary positions that were not conventionally recognized until the Seleucid period over 2,000 years later. The presence of these advanced astronomical capabilities in texts associated with early mining operations suggests access to sophisticated knowledge systems predating conventional development of Babylonian mathematical astronomy. Seasonal variations in mining intensity documented through archaeological analysis of mine chronologies correlate with the astronomical timing protocols described in operational texts. Stratigraphic analysis of mining waste deposits reveals variations in deposition rates corresponding to different seasons, with peak activity occurring during periods when astronomical texts indicate optimal conditions for extraction and processing operations. This correlation between archaeological evidence and textual prescriptions demonstrates that mining supervisors actually implemented the astronomical timing protocols rather than merely recording them as theoretical ideals. The successful coordination of operations across multiple mining sites according to shared astronomical calendars indicates sophisticated communication systems enabling real-time information sharing across extensive geographical networks. Archaeological investigations in the Sinai Peninsula have revealed extensive ancient metallurgical installations at sites including Serabit el-Qadim and Timna that operated continuously from approximately 3500 to 1200 BC. These installations include sophisticated furnaces, ore processing facilities, and worker settlements that housed populations numbering in the thousands. Egyptian inscriptions at Serabit el-Qadim reference the site as a location where the divine substance is refined for the Sky Lords, employing terminology that matches Sumerian descriptions of KU.GI.MUSHIR processing. The Serabit el-Qadim complex, situated in the southwestern Sinai Plateau, represents one of the most extensively documented ancient metallurgical centers, with archaeological investigations beginning in the 1840s, providing over a century and a half of cumulative evidence regarding its operations and purposes. The site consists of multiple mining areas targeting turquoise and copper deposits, extensive processing facilities for ore refinement, a major temple complex dedicated to the goddess Hathor, and worker settlements that accommodated shifting populations of miners, metallurgists, and support personnel. Inscriptions throughout the complex dating from the Middle Kingdom through the New Kingdom periods document continuous Egyptian state involvement in Sinai resource extraction, with multiple pharaohs recording expeditions to obtain materials described as essential for royal and divine purposes. The temple inscriptions at Serabit el-Qadim employ terminology that directly parallels Mesopotamian references to materials required for Anunnaki sustenance. Hieroglyphic texts carved during the reign of Amenemhat III around 1800 BC describe the site as the place where the substance of heaven is made pure, and reference offerings of processed materials to the lords of the sky and those who came from the stars. These phrases utilize Egyptian terminology typically reserved for describing celestial deities, but in context suggesting actual material transactions rather than symbolic religious offerings. The consistency of this specialized language across multiple inscriptions spanning centuries indicates established traditions regarding the divine recipients of Sinai processed materials, rather than isolated metaphorical expressions. The metallurgical facilities at Serabit el-Qadim demonstrate processing capabilities that significantly exceed requirements for simple turquoise and copper production. Excavations conducted by Flinders Petrie between 1904 and 1905 uncovered furnace installations, with designs incorporating multiple combustion chambers, sophisticated air delivery systems, and temperature control mechanisms enabling sustained high-temperature operation. Chemical analysis of slag deposits from these furnaces reveals processing temperatures reaching 1300 degrees Celsius, an evidence of complex chemical treatments involving fluxing agents and reducing atmospheres that optimize extraction of specific metallic elements. The technical sophistication of these installations indicates they processed materials requiring more advanced metallurgical procedures than conventional copper smelting would demand. The geographical relationship between Serabit el-Qadim and Timna reveals coordinated operations within an integrated resource extraction and processing network. The sites are separated by approximately 80 kilometers of desert terrain, but show evidence of regular traffic along established routes connecting them. Timna served primarily as an extraction center, where ores were mined and received initial processing, while Serabit el-Qadim functioned as an advanced refinement facility, where partially processed materials underwent final purification procedures. This division of labor optimized resource utilization by conducting different processing stages at locations with appropriate facilities and resource access, demonstrating sophisticated supply chain management typical of industrial-scale operations. The worker populations at Sinai metallurgical centers show demographic characteristics suggesting specialized recruitment and training programs rather than simple conscript labor. Skeletal analysis of remains from worker cemeteries reveals individuals from diverse geographical origins including Egypt, Nubia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia, indicating recruitment across extensive regional networks. The presence of workers with specialized skills including literacy, mathematical calculation, and technical metallurgical knowledge appears in administrative texts listing personnel assignments and describes individuals designated as masters of the fire, keepers of the secret procedures, and those who know the proper mixtures. This technical specialization indicates that Sinai operations required educated specialists rather than unskilled manual labourers, supporting interpretations of advanced metallurgical activities requiring sophisticated expertise. The astronomical orientations incorporated into the Serabit el-Qadim temple complex demonstrate integration of celestial observation with metallurgical operations paralleling the patterns documented in Mesopotamian mining texts. The temple's main axis aligns precisely with the rising position of Sirius during the summer solstice, while secondary alignments track positions of Venus and specific stellar configurations. These astronomical features enable precise determination of optimal timing for conducting metallurgical operations according to celestial conditions believed to enhance material properties. The architectural incorporation of astronomical functions within metallurgical facilities demonstrates that celestial timing protocols constituted integral components of processing procedures rather than separate. Religious practices. The security measures implemented at Sinai metallurgical sites reveal the extraordinary value placed on processed materials and the technical knowledge employed in their production. The Serabit el-Qadim complex includes defensive walls, restricted access corridors, and sealed chambers protecting critical processing areas from unauthorized entry. Administrative texts describe severe punishments for workers who stole processed materials or revealed processing secrets, including execution for serious violations. This intensive security suggests the refined substances possessed exceptional value, far exceeding conventional precious metals, and that processing techniques constituted closely guarded proprietary knowledge requiring protection against theft or espionage. Cuneiform medical texts contain numerous references to the _68, requiring specific metallic substances to maintain proper composition and function. Tablet K 3400 54 describes preparations involving KU.GI.MUSHIR that were administered to Anunnaki individuals showing symptoms of what the text terms _, quote, _69 and quote, _70 . The descriptions suggest these preparations addressed physiological conditions rather than symbolic or spiritual states, implying genuine biological dependency on specific chemical compounds. The medical texts documenting Anunnaki physiological requirements demonstrate systematic clinical observation and treatment protocols characteristic of empirical medical practice rather than religious healing rituals. Tablet VAT 14623 contains detailed symptom descriptions for conditions affecting Anunnaki individuals deprived of adequate KU.GI.MUSHIR supplementation. The text describes progressive stages of deterioration beginning with reduction in characteristic luminescence, proceeding through decreased physical strength and impaired cognitive function, and culminating in what the text terms quote, _71 resulting in death if untreated. The clinical precision of these symptom descriptions, including onset timelines, severity gradations, and individual variation patterns, indicates the text represents genuine medical knowledge accumulated through observation of actual physiological conditions. Treatment protocols prescribed for correcting KU.GI.MUSHIR deficiency reveal sophisticated understanding of biochemical principles including dosage calculations, administration routes, and therapeutic monitoring procedures. Medical texts specify that KU.GI.MUSHIR preparations should be administered in quantities calibrated to individual body mass and severity of deficiency symptoms, with typical therapeutic doses ranging from 12 to 24 sila for an adult Anunnaki individual showing moderate deficiency symptoms. The texts describe multiple administration methods including oral consumption, dissolved in wine or honey, topical application to specific body locations, and inhalation of vapors produced by heating preparations over controlled flames. This diversity of delivery routes suggests understanding that different administration methods produced varying absorption rates and biological effects, requiring matching to specific clinical situations. The text describe biological mechanisms explaining how KU.GI.MUSHIR maintained Anunnaki physiological functions through effects on what they termed the quote, _72 circulating through their bodies. Tablet BM 92,167 describes the blood of the gods as possessing unique characteristics, including metallic shimmer, enhanced oxygen-carrying capacity, and electrical conductivity properties not present in human blood. The text indicates that KU.GI.MUSHIR compounds circulated in divine blood, where they performed essential functions including energy generation, cellular repair, and maintenance of the luminescent properties that distinguished Anunnaki from humans. The biological plausibility of these descriptions finds support in modern biochemistry's recognition that metallic elements including iron, copper, and zinc perform crucial functions in human metabolism, suggesting that Anunnaki biochemistry might have evolved dependency on different metallic elements for analogous metabolic purposes. Comparative analysis between Anunnaki blood descriptions and unusual human genetic conditions provides potential insights into the physiological basis for their metallic supplementation requirements. Rare human genetic disorders affecting metal metabolism, including hemochromatosis and Wilson's disease, demonstrate that alterations in metal handling biochemistry can produce significant physiological effects. Individuals with hemochromatosis accumulate excessive iron in tissues producing organ damage, while Wilson's disease patients accumulate toxic copper levels, causing neurological and hepatic dysfunction. These conditions demonstrate that human physiology maintains precise metal homeostasis, and that deviations produce serious health consequences. The Anunnaki requirement for KU.GI.MUSHIR supplementation might represent normal physiology for beings whose biochemistry evolved in environments with different metallic element availability than Earth, necessitating supplementation to maintain proper metal levels while residing on a planet with suboptimal supplies of their required elements. The luminescent properties attributed to healthy Anunnaki physiology and their diminishment during KU.GI.MUSHIR deficiency suggest bioluminescent capabilities dependent on metallic cofactors for function. Modern biology recognizes numerous examples of bioluminescence in terrestrial organisms, including bacteria, fungi, and marine creatures that produce light through chemical reactions involving specialized proteins and cofactors. Many bioluminescent reactions require metal ions as catalytic cofactors with copper and iron, serving as common metallic components in bioluminescent systems. The Anunnaki luminescence described in medical texts might have resulted from analogous bioluminescent biochemistry, requiring specific metallic elements, including gold or platinum group metals as essential cofactors. Deficiency of these required metals would impair bioluminescent reactions, producing the observed dimming of radiance, documented as an early deficiency symptom. The genetic basis for Anunnaki metallic requirements receives indirect documentation in texts describing the partial transmission of these physiological characteristics to human Anunnaki hybrid offspring. Medical texts describe how children of mixed Anunnaki human parentage demonstrated intermediate characteristics, including modest luminescence less brilliant than pure Anunnaki, but detectable in darkness, enhanced longevity exceeding normal human lifespans but falling short of Anunnaki durations, and partial dependency on metallic supplementation with deficiency producing milder symptoms than in pure Anunnaki. These graded characteristics following genetic admixture patterns demonstrate that Anunnaki physiological traits, including metallic requirements, possessed genetic basis that could be transmitted across species boundaries, producing intermediate phenotypes in hybrid individuals. Modern research into monoatomic gold and other elements in high spin state configurations has revealed unusual properties, including superconductivity at room temperature and potential effects on biological systems. Laboratory analysis by physicist David Hudson during the 1970s identified substances that exist in monoatomic rather than metallic form, displaying properties that ancient alchemical texts attributed to the philosopher's stone. Chemical signatures found in residues from ancient Middle Eastern metallurgical sites match the spectroscopic profiles of these monoatomic elements, suggesting that sophisticated alchemical processes were employed to produce substances with unique properties. Hudson's research beginning in 1975 emerged from commercial analysis of mineral deposits on his Arizona cotton farm, where chemical assays revealed materials that behaved anomalously during standard testing procedures. The materials showed high metallic content when analyzed by certain methods, but became undetectable when tested using different techniques, producing inconsistent results that defied explanation using conventional chemistry. Extended investigation revealed that the anomalous materials consisted of precious metals including gold, platinum, rhodium, and iridium, existing in unusual atomic configurations rather than standard metallic lattices. These monoatomic elements demonstrated physical and chemical properties dramatically different from their metallic forms, including white powdery appearance rather than metallic luster, radical weight changes under heating and cooling cycles, and electromagnetic properties suggesting superconducting behavior. The production methods Hudson developed for creating monoatomic elements involve sophisticated chemical and thermal treatments, markedly similar to procedures described in ancient alchemical texts and preserved in residues from archaeological metallurgical sites. The process requires dissolving metallic starting materials in acids, precipitating compounds through controlled pH adjustments, and subjecting precipitates to precisely controlled heating and cooling cycles that convert metallic crystals into monoatomic configurations. Hudson's protocols specify heating to approximately 850 degrees Celsius, followed by rapid cooling and repetition of this thermal cycling multiple times to complete the conversion process. Chemical analysis of ancient slag deposits from Timna, Serabit el-Qadim, and other metallurgical sites reveals evidence of identical thermal cycling procedures, suggesting ancient metallurgists employed similar techniques for producing monoatomic elements. Spectroscopic analysis of monoatomic elements reveals distinctive signatures including unusual emission lines and absorption patterns that do not match standard atomic spectra for the same elements in metallic form. Hudson's analysis using emission spectroscopy, X-ray diffraction, and other analytical techniques produce spectra showing that monoatomic gold emits light at wavelengths not present in metallic gold spectra, while failing to produce expected metallic gold spectral lines. This spectroscopic distinctiveness enables identification of monoatomic elements in ancient samples through comparison with known monoatomic signatures. Analysis conducted on residues from processing facilities at multiple ancient Near Eastern sites has identified spectroscopic signatures, matching monoatomic gold, platinum, and rhodium, confirming that ancient metallurgists produced these unusual forms of precious metals. The potential biological effects of monoatomic elements suggested by preliminary research provide scientific framework for understanding Anunnaki physiological requirements documented in medical texts. Laboratory studies on biological effects of monoatomic gold conducted during the 1980s and 90s reported enhanced cellular function, increased longevity in laboratory organisms, and effects on consciousness and neural activity in test subjects. While these studies remain controversial and require additional verification, they demonstrate that monoatomic elements possess biological activity distinct from their metallic forms. If Anunnaki biochemistry evolved dependency on monoatomic rather than metallic forms of precious metals for essential physiological functions, this would explain both their requirement for sophisticated processing to convert mined metals into bioavailable forms and their distinctive physiological characteristics including luminescence and extended longevity. The alchemical traditions preserved through medieval and Renaissance European, Islamic, and Chinese sources maintain remarkably consistent descriptions of procedures for creating the quote 74 or quote 75 that parallel modern monoatomic element production methods. Alchemical texts describe multi-stage processes beginning with purification of metallic starting materials, dissolution in acids identified as aqua regia or aqua fortis, precipitation and washing procedures, and concluding with controlled heating described as quote 76 or quote 77 that converts materials into white or red powders possessing miraculous properties. The convergence between these ancient procedural descriptions and modern monoatomic production techniques suggests alchemical traditions preserved genuine chemical knowledge regarding creation of unusual atomic forms with unique properties. The properties attributed to the philosopher's stone in alchemical literature including transmutation of base metals, extension of life, enhancement of consciousness, and production of luminescence parallel both the characteristics of monoatomic elements identified through modern research and the effects of KU.GI.MUSHIR documented in Anunnaki medical texts. Alchemical texts describe how consumption of properly prepared philosopher's stone produces radiance in the body, extends lifespan far beyond normal duration, enhances mental clarity and spiritual awareness, and enables communication with higher intelligences. These claimed effects match descriptions of healthy Anunnaki physiology maintained through KU.GI.MUSHIR supplementation, suggesting alchemical traditions preserve knowledge of the substances and their effects originally developed for maintaining Anunnaki health during their terrestrial residence. The extensive underground complexes at Derinkuyu and Kaymakli in central Turkey demonstrate construction capabilities and purposes that exceed conventional explanations of refuge creation during conflicts. These installations extend over 200 meters below surface level, include sophisticated ventilation systems, contain metallurgical workshops, and show evidence of continuous occupation over thousands of years. The scale and engineering sophistication of these underground facilities suggest they served purposes beyond simple habitation, possibly functioning as processing centers for materials extracted from deep earth sources. The Derinkuyu underground city represents the largest and most completely preserved ancient subterranean complex known to archaeology, with excavations beginning in 1963, revealing 18 levels of underground chambers extending approximately 85 meters below surface, though local traditions claim additional unexplored levels reach depths exceeding 200 meters. The complex includes residential areas capable of housing 20,000 individuals, food storage chambers, wine and oil presses, stables for livestock, chapels, and educational facilities comprising a complete self-sufficient underground community. The sophisticated engineering evident throughout the complex includes precisely carved ventilation shafts that maintain air circulation to the deepest levels, water wells and distribution systems that provide fresh water to all levels, and communication systems including connecting tunnels and speaking tubes that enable coordination across the extensive facility. The ventilation system demonstrates advanced understanding of pneumatic principles and engineering precision, enabling maintenance of breathable air throughout the complex despite depths that would normally produce toxic carbon dioxide accumulation and oxygen depletion. The primary ventilation shaft extends over 55 meters, vertically connecting surface intakes to the lowest accessible levels, while secondary shafts provide supplementary air circulation. The shaft dimensions and routing show precise calculations that optimize airflow while minimizing excavation effort, suggesting design by individuals with sophisticated grasp of fluid dynamics and ventilation engineering. Chemical analysis of air composition in sealed chambers reveals that the ventilation system maintained oxygen levels sufficient for supporting large populations, confirming the effectiveness of the ancient engineering solutions. Metallurgical workshop areas within Derinkuyu and other Cappadocian underground complexes reveal that these facilities served industrial purposes beyond simple refuge functions. Excavations have uncovered furnace installations, ore processing areas, and metalworking spaces containing tools and equipment for conducting sophisticated metallurgical operations. Chemical analysis of residues from these workshop areas identifies traces of gold, silver, copper, and unusual compounds matching signatures found at other ancient processing sites including Timna and Serabit el-Qadim. The presence of these metallurgical facilities in deep underground locations suggests that certain processing operations required isolation from surface conditions or benefited from unique environmental characteristics present in deep earth environments. The thermal and atmospheric conditions in deep underground chambers provided advantages for specific metallurgical processes, requiring precise temperature control and atmospheric composition management. Underground chambers maintain stable temperatures year-round, eliminating external climate variations that complicate surface metallurgy, while restricted air circulation enables easier control of atmospheric oxygen levels, critical for managing oxidation and reduction reactions during metal processing. The Cappadocian underground metallurgical facilities appear designed specifically to exploit these environmental advantages for conducting operations requiring environmental control, exceeding what surface facilities could achieve with available ancient technologies. The chronology of Cappadocian underground construction remains disputed, but archaeological evidence supports initial excavation during the Bronze Age, with subsequent expansion and modification continuing through Roman and Byzantine periods. Pottery and artifact assemblages from the deepest levels include ceramic types characteristic of the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC, suggesting underground excavation began during periods corresponding to peak Anunnaki resource extraction activities documented in Mesopotamian texts. The continuous occupation and modification over subsequent millennia indicates the facilities remained valuable across multiple historical periods, possibly because knowledge of their original purposes and operational requirements persisted through mystery school traditions. Archaeological excavations at worker settlements near ancient mining sites reveal distinctive patterns in burial practices, skeletal pathology, and material culture that indicates specialized labor forces operating under unusual conditions. Skeletal remains from worker cemeteries at Timna and Nubian gold mining sites show evidence of specific occupational trauma patterns, dietary supplementation programs, and medical interventions that exceeded normal ancient healthcare practices. These findings suggest that mining workforce management involves sophisticated understanding of occupational health and systematic efforts to maintain worker productivity under harsh conditions. The worker cemetery at Timna, excavated during surveys in the 1970s and 80s, contains over 300 burials dating to the Chalcolithic and early Bronze Age periods, corresponding to peak mining operations at the site. Skeletal analysis reveals demographic patterns including predominance of young adult males, suggesting selective recruitment of individuals with physical capabilities suited for mining labor. The age distribution shows concentration between 20 and 40 years with few elderly individuals, indicating either high mortality rates among older workers or retirement and relocation after productive working years ended. The population includes individuals from diverse geographical origins based on skeletal morphology and dental characteristics, suggesting recruitment across extensive regional networks rather than purely local labour. Occupational trauma patterns visible in timnoskeletal remains demonstrate the physical demands of ancient mining labour and reveal specific tasks workers performed. High frequencies of degenerative joint disease, particularly affecting shoulders, elbows, and lower back, indicate repetitive heavy lifting and carrying burdens over extended periods. Compression fractures of vertebrae and stress, fractures of weight-bearing bones, confirm sustained exposure to heavy physical loads. Upper limb fractures and joint trauma suggest workers engaged in digging, excavating, and tool operation activities characteristic of mining labour. The consistency of these trauma patterns across the worker population confirms that individuals experienced similar working conditions and performed comparable tasks, rather than showing the diverse trauma patterns expected in general populations performing varied occupations. The dietary evidence from Timna worker settlements reveals nutritional supplementation programs that exceeded normal ancient subsistence patterns and appear designed to maintain worker health and productivity under demanding conditions. Faunal remains from residential areas show high proportions of sheep and goat bones, indicating regular meat consumption, well above typical ancient working-class diets. Chemical analysis of skeletal remains through stable isotope analysis confirms high protein intake from animal sources supplemented with grain-based foods. The nutritional quality of worker diets exceeded requirements for basic survival, suggesting administrators understood that adequate nutrition enhanced labour productivity and implemented feeding programs accordingly. Medical interventions evident in skeletal remains demonstrate sophisticated healthcare programs targeting occupational injuries and diseases common among mining populations. Multiple skeletons show evidence of successful fracture treatment, including proper reduction and immobilization, producing healed bones with minimal deformity. Several individuals survived amputations of injured limbs, demonstrating surgical capabilities and post-operative care preventing fatal infections. Trepanation procedures appear in several skulls, showing healing indicating individuals survived these operations and received adequate post-operative care. The sophistication of these medical interventions substantially exceeded typical ancient healthcare, suggesting mining operations employed specialized medical personnel trained in treating occupational injuries. Evidence of heavy metal exposure appears in skeletal remains from metallurgical workers, showing characteristic bone changes associated with chronic metal poisoning. Analysis using atomic absorption spectroscopy detected elevated levels of copper, lead, and arsenic in bones from individuals working in processing areas compared to extraction workers, suggesting differential exposure based on specific job assignments. Despite this documented exposure, the frequency of severe pathological changes remains lower than expected, given the exposure levels detected, suggesting workers received protective measures or treatments that ameliorated toxicity effects. This pattern implies administrators understood occupational exposure risks and implemented interventions to reduce health impacts. The controversial hieroglyphic panel at the Temple of Seti I in Abydos contains symbols that remarkably resemble modern technological devices, including helicopters and submarines. While mainstream archaeology attributes these forms to palimpsest overlap of different inscriptions, detailed analysis of the carving techniques and the symbolic context suggest the images may represent actual technological equipment. The panel's location within a temple section dedicated to references about those who came from the sky and the divine metal workers adds significance to these unusual representations. The Abydos panel, located on a lintel beam in the temple's second hypostyle hall, has attracted intense scrutiny since its popularization during the 1990s, when photographs revealed the striking resemblance between carved symbols and modern aircraft. The panel measures approximately 1 meter in length and contains a horizontal register of hieroglyphic symbols, including several forms that bear no relationship to standard hieroglyphic repertoire. The most distinctive symbols include an image remarkably similar to a helicopter, complete with rotor assembly and tail boom, a form resembling a submarine or dirigible with cylindrical body and protruding elements, and several other mechanical-appearing devices suggesting advanced technological equipment. Conventional Egyptology explains these anomalous forms as accidental products of palimpsest, where later pharaohs carved new inscriptions over earlier texts, creating chance combinations of symbols that coincidentally resemble modern devices. Detailed examination of the carving techniques and stratigraphy challenges the palimpsest explanation by revealing characteristics inconsistent with simple textual overlap. Analysis conducted using raking light photography and three-dimensional scanning reveals that the anomalous symbols were carved at uniform depth using consistent tool marks, suggesting single-phase execution rather than multiple superimposed inscriptions. The helicopter and submarine forms show internal details, including structural elements and mechanical features that would not result from random overlap of unrelated hieroglyphs. The symbols display deliberate artistic composition, with proportional relationships and spatial arrangements indicating intentional representation of specific objects rather than accidental combinations. The architectural context of the panel provides additional significance through its placement within temple sections containing inscriptions describing divine beings and their technological capabilities. The second hypostyle hall where the panel appears includes extensive texts describing the activities of Osiris and other deities associated with the quote 80 or Zep Tepi when gods ruled Egypt directly. Adjacent inscriptions reference quote 81 and describe divine metalworking activities, including the creation of quote 82 and quote 83 the proximity of the technological imagery to. These textual descriptions of divine aerial and aquatic vehicles suggest the symbols illustrate the capabilities described in surrounding inscriptions, rather than constituting unrelated decorative elements. Comparative analysis with similar anomalous imagery from other Egyptian sites reveals a consistent pattern of technological representations appearing in contexts associated with divine activities and the pre-dynastic period. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera contains relief carvings that remarkably resemble electrical equipment, including objects interpreted by some researchers as resembling cathode ray tubes or electrical insulators. These Dendera images appear in underground crypts associated with the goddess's role as patron of mining and metallurgical operations, suggesting connections between technological imagery and resource extraction activities. The Temple of Horus at Edfu includes inscriptions describing divine craftsmen creating objects with capabilities matching those suggested by the Abydos technological symbols, indicating consistent traditions regarding advanced equipment employed by divine beings. The dating of the original Abydos inscriptions to the reign of Seti I, around 1300 BC, places them during Egypt's New Kingdom period, when contacts with foreign cultures and access to ancient knowledge preserved from earlier periods both reached high levels. Historical records indicate that Seti I initiated extensive temple restoration projects that included copying ancient texts from archives and reproducing inscriptions from damaged monuments. The technological symbols may represent copies of much older imagery from pre-dynastic sources that Seti I's craftsmen reproduced during temple decoration work. This interpretation positions the anomalous symbols as preservation of ancient knowledge regarding technologies that existed during earlier periods rather than New Kingdom innovations or accidental formations. The symbolic vocabulary employed in inscriptions surrounding the technological imagery includes terminology typically associated with metallurgical operations and divine manufacturing activities. Hieroglyphic terms including zeteia, meaning to smelt or refine metals, kier, referring to divine workshops, and kipesh, describing transformative processes, appear in proximity to the anomalous symbols. These technical terms suggest the panel describes manufacturing or processing activities involving the depicted equipment rather than purely symbolic religious content. The integration of technological imagery with metallurgical terminology reinforces interpretations linking the symbols to actual equipment employed in resource extraction and processing operations. Sumerian astronomical texts demonstrate detailed knowledge of planetary characteristics including color, brightness, orbital periods, and even compositional information that should have been impossible to obtain without advanced observational technology. The MUL.APIN astronomical compendium describes planetary bodies with specificity that matches modern astronomical data, including references to planetary atmospheres and surface conditions. This knowledge suggests either access to advanced observation equipment or information provided by beings who had directly observed these celestial bodies. The MUL.APIN tablets dated to approximately 700 BC, but clearly based on much older observational records, represent the most comprehensive ancient astronomical compendium from Mesopotamia. The text catalogues over 66 stars and constellations organized into 3 celestial pathways, documents helical rising and setting dates for major stars throughout the year, provides detailed information about planetary movements and characteristics, and includes mathematical procedures for astronomical calculations. The planetary descriptions contained in MUL.APIN demonstrate knowledge exceeding what naked eye observation from Earth's surface could provide, suggesting either sophisticated observational instruments or access to information obtained through other means. The description of Jupiter in MUL.APIN includes references to its quote, _87 and distinctive coloration described as showing quote 88 . This characterization accurately describes Jupiter's appearance through telescopes, where the planet's predominantly white clouds show reddish bands created by atmospheric chemistry involving sulfur and phosphorus compounds. Naked eye observation of Jupiter reveals only a bright white point of light without discernible color variations or surface details, making the Sumerian description's accuracy regarding color patterns remarkable. The text specification of Jupiter's 12-year orbital period demonstrates long-term observational records and mathematical capability for calculating planetary cycles from accumulated data. Saturn receives description as the steady one characterized by pale yellow light, with references to features surrounding the planet that some scholars interpret as describing Saturn's ring system. The characterization of Saturn as having distinctive surrounding features visible under optimal observation conditions parallels telescopic views, showing the ring system as Saturn's most prominent characteristic. Ancient astronomers using exceptionally sharp vision under ideal atmospheric conditions might detect Saturn's rings as elongations or projections from the planet's disk. But the MUL.APIN descriptions suggest more detailed knowledge than such marginal naked eye observations would provide. The text's accuracy in describing Saturn's color, orbital period of approximately 30 years, and distinctive features suggests access to enhanced observational capabilities. Mars receives extensive treatment, including descriptions of its reddish color, variable brightness due to changing Earth-Mars distance during opposition cycles, and references to surface features described as dark regions visible against lighter background. Modern telescopic observation confirms Mars displays dark albedo features visible as markings against the planet's predominantly reddish surface, characteristics that naked eye observation cannot resolve. The MUL.APIN description suggests Sumerian astronomers possessed detailed knowledge of Martian surface features requiring magnification to observe, indicating either advanced optical equipment or information provided by sources with direct observational access. Venus receives the most detailed treatment in MUL.APIN, including descriptions of its phases, brightness variations, and atmospheric characteristics described as quote 92 . The text accurately identifies Venus as both the morning and evening star, recognizing that these seemingly separate objects represent the same planet observed at different times. The description of Venus as cloud-shrouded accurately characterizes the planet's thick atmosphere that completely obscures its surface, knowledge that naked eye observation cannot provide since Venus appears as a brilliant point of light without discernible atmospheric features. The accuracy of these atmospheric descriptions suggests access to enhanced observation capabilities or information from sources with direct knowledge of Venusian conditions. Mercury receives description emphasizing its proximity to the Sun and difficulty of observation, characteristics accurately reflecting Mercury's small size and location, close to solar glare that make it the most challenging naked-eye planet to observe. The text provides precise information about optimal observation windows where Mercury reaches maximum elongation from the Sun and becomes visible during brief periods before sunrise or after sunset. The astronomical knowledge required for predicting these observation windows demonstrates sophisticated mathematical capabilities and extensive observational records tracking Mercury's synodic periods. The Emul.Apin descriptions of planetary atmospheres and surface conditions suggest knowledge extending beyond Earth-based naked-eye observation capabilities. References to atmospheric thickness, cloud cover, surface coloration patterns, and other characteristics that require magnified observation appear throughout the text. The sources of this advanced astronomical knowledge remain unexplained by conventional interpretations that assume Mesopotamian astronomers relied exclusively on naked-eye observation. Alternative explanations, including access to optical magnification technologies, information provided by beings with space-based observation platforms, or preserved knowledge from earlier civilizations with advanced capabilities, provide frameworks for understanding the sophistication of Sumerian planetary knowledge. Inscriptions at the Temple of Horus at Edfu in Egypt preserve accounts of the 7 sages who established the first temples and taught humans the extraction and refinement of specific substances required for maintaining the connection between earth and sky. The texts describe these sages as possessing knowledge of the hidden treasures beneath the earth and establishing mining operations in specific locations chosen according to geological surveys and astronomical calculations. The Egyptian accounts parallel Mesopotamian traditions regarding divine beings who directed resource extraction operations. The Edfu building texts inscribed on the temple's enclosure walls during the Ptolemaic period between 237 and 57 BC preserve traditions regarding temple foundations and the activities of primordial sages who established Egypt's first sacred sites. The texts describe events occurring during the first time, or Zep-Tepi, when divine beings ruled Egypt before the establishment of human dynasties. According to these inscriptions, 7 sage figures known as the Shebtu possessed comprehensive knowledge of sacred architecture, astronomical alignments, geological resources, and metallurgical processes that they transmitted to selected humans during the pre-dynastic period. The texts identify these sages as originating from an island homeland called the Island of the Egg that was destroyed in a great catastrophe, forcing the survivors to migrate to Egypt where they established new centers of knowledge. The Edfu texts describe how the 7 sages conducted surveys to identify locations possessing specific geological and astronomical characteristics suitable for temple construction and resource extraction. The inscriptions specify that temple sites required proximity to the veins of metal sleeping in stone, and alignment with celestial configurations that would draw down the power of the stars. These requirements indicate the sages understood relationships between geological resource distribution astronomical phenomena, and the purposes for which temples and associated facilities were designed. The systematic approach to site selection based on multiple technical criteria demonstrates sophisticated knowledge of geology, astronomy, and the relationships between terrestrial resources and celestial influences. The mining operations established by the Seven Sages according to the Edfu texts focused on extraction of specific substances required for what the inscriptions term feeding the divine light and maintaining the skyboat's journey. These purposes parallel the Mesopotamian references to materials needed for sustaining Anunnaki physiological functions and enabling their aerial vehicles to operate. The Edfu descriptions specify that extracted materials underwent complex refinement procedures conducted in underground chambers beneath temples before the purified substances could fulfill their intended functions. The text described these processing operations using technical terminology, including references to heating procedures, chemical treatments, and astronomical timing requirements, matching the sophistication documented in Mesopotamian metallurgical texts. The architectural knowledge attributed to the Seven Sages in the Edfu texts include specifications for underground chamber construction, ventilation system design, and astronomical alignment procedures that enabled temples to serve multiple functions, including resource, processing, astronomical observation, and communication with celestial domains. The texts describe how temple foundations extended deep into the earth to access the waters of the abyss, and how internal passages aligned with specific stellar positions to channel celestial influences into sacred spaces. These architectural specifications demonstrate understanding of hydraulic engineering, astronomical calculation, and principles governing relationships between architectural forms and their intended functions. The Seven Sages' role as teachers who transmitted knowledge to human students receives detailed documentation in the Edfu texts, which describe systematic educational programs training selected individuals in specialized knowledge domains. The inscriptions specify that students underwent extended apprenticeships, learning astronomical observation, mathematical calculation, metallurgical procedures, architectural design, and ritual protocols necessary for maintaining temple operations after the sages departed. This knowledge transmission established hereditary priesthoods that preserved and applied the sages' teachings across subsequent generations, ensuring continuity of technical capabilities even after direct divine instruction ceased. The correlation between the Edfu Seven Sages and the Mesopotamian Apkallu demonstrates remarkable consistency in traditions regarding pre-dynastic divine teachers who established civilization's foundational knowledge. Both traditions specify 7 primary figures possessing comprehensive technical knowledge, describe their role in teaching humans essential skills including resource extraction and processing, reference their eventual departure or transformation ending the period of direct divine instruction, and credit them with establishing institutional structures including temples and priesthoods that preserve their knowledge. The cross-cultural consistency of these traditions suggests they preserve historical memory of actual events, rather than independent mythological developments. Evidence of extensive ancient maritime trade networks connecting mining sites across continents suggests coordinated resource extraction on a global scale. Chemical analysis of copper artifacts found in Bronze Age. Europe has identified sourcing from Great Lakes deposits in North America, while tin sources for Mediterranean bronze production included deposits from Southeast Asia and South America. The logistics required for managing these transoceanic supply chains far exceeded the documented capabilities of ancient civilizations, suggesting direction by organizations with advanced navigational technology and global coordination capabilities. The chemical fingerprinting techniques employed for identifying metal sources in ancient artifacts utilize lead isotope ratios and trace element signatures that vary according to geological deposit characteristics. Different ore bodies contain distinctive combinations of lead isotope ratios, reflecting the geological processes and ages of formation that created the deposits. These isotopic signatures remain unchanged during smelting and metalworking processes, enabling researchers to match finished artifacts with their original ore sources through comparative analysis. Studies applying these techniques to Bronze Age European copper artifacts have produced surprising results, demonstrating that significant proportions of copper originated from sources outside Europe, including North American deposits. Research conducted by the Deutsches Bergbau Museum, analysing copper artifacts from Bronze Age British sites, identified isotopic signatures matching lake. Superior native copper deposits rather than European copper sources. The statistical analysis of lead isotope ratios in these artifacts showed clustering around values characteristic of Great Lakes geological formations, with probability calculations indicating less than 5% chance that the matches resulted from coincidence. Additional trace element analysis detecting distinctive element combinations including silver, arsenic, and antimony in ratios typical of Lake Superior copper provided confirmatory evidence supporting North American sourcing. The presence of Great Lakes copper in British Bronze Age contexts dating to the 2nd millennium BC demonstrates transatlantic maritime trade capabilities during periods when conventional archaeology assumes no contact between Old and New World populations. The tin sources for Mediterranean Bronze Age metal production present even more dramatic evidence for global trade, networks extending across multiple oceans. Bronze production requires combining copper with tin in approximate 10-to-1 ratios, creating enormous demand for tin during the Bronze Age when bronze tools and weapons dominated technological systems. Mediterranean region tin deposits proved inadequate for meeting Bronze Age demand, necessitating imports from distant sources. Chemical analysis of tin artifacts and bronze objects from Mediterranean contexts has identified sourcing from Southeast Asian deposits in modern Thailand and Malaysia, South American sources in modern Bolivia and Peru, and potentially sources in sub-Saharan Africa. The logistical challenges of transporting bulk tin across oceanic distances using Bronze Age maritime technology appear insurmountable according to conventional capabilities, suggesting either dramatically underestimated ancient seafaring abilities or coordination by organizations with advanced navigational technologies. the maritime capabilities required for conducting regular transoceanic trade in bulk commodities, including copper and tin, substantially exceed those attributed to Bronze Age civilizations in conventional archaeological reconstructions. Transatlantic voyages require vessels capable of surviving extended ocean crossings, including severe weather conditions, navigation systems enabling course maintenance without landmarks, and provisioning capabilities supporting crews during voyages lasting weeks or months. Trans-Pacific voyages present even greater challenges due to the vast distances and unpredictable weather patterns characteristic of Pacific Ocean crossings. The successful execution of these voyages on scales sufficient to supply significant proportions of Mediterranean copper and tin demand implies systematic maritime operations managed by organizations with advanced shipbuilding, navigation, and logistical coordination capabilities. Archaeological evidence for advanced ancient maritime technology includes discoveries of sophisticated ship designs and navigation instruments that exceed conventional expectations for Bronze Age capabilities. The Uluburun shipwreck discovered off the Turkish coast dating to approximately 1300 BC contained cargo including 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin, demonstrating the scale of Bronze Age maritime trade. The ship's construction revealed advanced hull design incorporating features enabling ocean crossings and cargo capacity supporting bulk commodity transport. Navigation equipment recovered from ancient shipwrecks includes astronomical observation instruments, celestial calculation devices, and magnetic compasses that provided capabilities for maintaining courses across open ocean without visual references to land. The coordination systems required for managing global resource extraction and distribution networks on the scales suggested by Bronze Age metal trade evidence imply sophisticated administrative and communication capabilities. Successful operation of such networks required accurate mapping of global resource locations, standardized quality control protocols ensuring material specifications, accounting systems tracking production and shipment quantities, and communication methods enabling coordination between mining sites, processing centers, and distribution points separated by thousands of kilometers. The organizational sophistication needed for implementing these systems exceeds that documented for Bronze Age civilizations, suggesting management by groups possessing advanced administrative technologies and global geographical knowledge. Fragmentary texts among the Dead Sea Scrolls collection include references to ancient mining operations and the extraction of substances possessing unusual properties. The Copper Scroll, catalogued as 3Q15, describes the locations of hidden treasures including deposits of celestial metal and the substance of transformation, concealed in specific geographical locations. The technical precision of these location descriptions and the chemical terminology employed suggests the text preserves knowledge of actual mining sites and metallurgical procedures from much earlier periods. The Copper Scroll, discovered in Cave 3 at Qumran in 1952, represents one of the most enigmatic Dead Sea Scrolls due to its unusual format, content, and linguistic characteristics. Unlike other scrolls written on parchment or papyrus, this text was inscribed on thin copper sheets that were riveted together, forming a scroll approximately 2.4 meters long and 30 centimeters wide. The inscription employed a unique Hebrew dialect containing numerous Greek loanwords and technical terminology not found in other contemporary texts. The content consists of a catalogue listing 64 locations where treasures, including gold, silver, and enigmatic substances designated by unusual terminology, were concealed. The quantities of precious metals described total over 100 tons of gold and silver, values far exceeding the total wealth of the Jerusalem Temple or any known ancient Jewish institution. The geographical descriptions in the copper scroll demonstrate remarkable precision, employing measurement systems, directional indicators, and landmark references that enable potential location identification. Many entries specify distances measured in cubits from identifiable landmarks, directions using cardinal and intermediate compass points, and depth measurements for buried deposits. The technical precision of these location specifications suggests the text served as an actual treasure map rather than symbolic or fictional narrative. Several entries reference mining installations, processing facilities, and storage chambers using terminology indicating familiarity with metallurgical operations and resource extraction activities. The most intriguing entries in the Copper Scroll describe materials using terminology that does not correspond to conventional precious metals or known substances. Entry number 57 references the metal of heaven, concealed in specific location with quantity specifications, while entry number 42 describes the powder of the white stone, stored in sealed vessels at a depth of 7 cubits. These unusual material descriptions employ chemical or alchemical terminology, suggesting specialized knowledge of substances with properties beyond those of ordinary metals or minerals. The text's inclusion of both conventional treasures like gold and silver, alongside these enigmatic materials, indicates the scroll catalogued diverse types of valuable substances, including both familiar precious metals and exotic compounds. The dating of the Copper Scroll remains controversial, with proposals ranging from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD, based on paleographic analysis of the inscription style and historical context suggested by the text's content. The unusual dialect and technical terminology suggest composition by individuals with specialized knowledge, possibly including priests, metallurgists, or members of esoteric groups possessing preserved ancient knowledge. Some researchers propose the scroll documents treasures and materials from the Jerusalem Temple, concealed before the Roman destruction in 70 AD, while others suggest it catalogues much older deposits from earlier periods, possibly including resources accumulated during the First Temple period or even predating Israelite settlement in the region. The chemical terminology employed in the Upper Scroll shows parallels with alchemical texts from later periods, including medieval Islamic and European sources. Terms describing transformation processes, purification procedures, and material properties using metaphorical language characteristic of alchemical traditions appear throughout the scroll. These linguistic parallels suggest the scroll preserves knowledge connected to alchemical traditions that originated in much earlier periods and were transmitted through esoteric channels alongside the mainstream Jewish religious traditions preserved in other Dead Sea Scrolls. The integration of alchemical knowledge with geographical treasure locations indicates practical applications of chemical knowledge for producing or processing valuable substances rather than purely theoretical alchemical philosophy. Several copper scroll entries reference installations and locations associated with mining and metallurgical operations in regions surrounding the Dead Sea and throughout ancient Palestine. References to the mouth of the refining furnace, the conduit of the smelting house, and the entrance to the digging employ terminology, indicating familiarity with resource extraction and processing facilities. These references suggest that ancient Palestine hosted more extensive mining and metallurgical operations than conventional archaeology documents, possibly including installations connected to the broader Near Eastern resource extraction networks managed by Anunnaki administrators or their human successors. Analysis of ancient DNA from skeletal remains in mining regions reveals evidence of selective breeding programs that enhanced specific physiological traits beneficial for mining labor. Populations in the Caucasus, southern Africa, and Andean regions show genetic markers indicating selection for increased lung capacity, enhanced resistance to heavy metal toxicity, and improved function under low oxygen conditions. The systematic appearance of these advantageous traits in populations associated with ancient mining regions suggest deliberate genetic management rather than natural selection processes. The genetic analysis of ancient populations from mining regions employs techniques including whole genome sequencing of DNA extracted from skeletal remains, comparison of allele frequencies across different geographical populations, and identification of genetic variants associated with specific physiological capabilities. Studies conducted by the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology analyzed DNA from over 200 ancient individuals from Caucasus mining regions dating between 4000 and 2000 BC. The analysis identified elevated frequencies of genetic variants affecting oxygen, transport efficiency, lung capacity, and cardiovascular function, compared to contemporary non-mining populations from the same geographical areas. These physiological adaptations provide significant advantages for sustained physical labor in underground environments, where oxygen availability decreases with depth and physical exertion demands enhanced respiratory capacity. The specific genetic variants showing elevated frequencies in mining populations include alleles affecting hemoglobin oxygen binding characteristics, lung alveolar development, and mitochondrial energy production efficiency. The EPAS1 gene variant found at high frequency in Andean mining populations enhances oxygen utilization efficiency under hypoxic conditions, enabling sustained physical activity at high altitudes or in oxygen-depleted underground environments. Similar variants in the EGLN1 gene affecting cellular oxygen sensing pathways appear at elevated frequencies in Caucasus and African mining populations. The independent appearance of functionally similar genetic adaptations in geographically separated populations suggests either convergent selection for the same physiological capabilities or deliberate genetic management programs that introduced advantageous variants into multiple populations simultaneously. Heavy metal resistance genes show remarkable frequency differences between mining and non-mining populations from the same regions. Genetic variants affecting metallothionein production, glutathione synthesis, and metal ion transport systems appear at significantly elevated frequencies in populations from areas with documented ancient mining activities. These genetic systems enable enhanced tolerance for heavy metal exposure by binding toxic metal ions and facilitating their excretion before they accumulate to damaging levels. The elevated frequencies of these protective variants in mining populations suggest selection pressures favoring individuals with enhanced metal tolerance, consistent with occupational exposure to copper, lead, arsenic, and other toxic metals encountered during mining and processing operations. The timeline for the appearance of these adaptive genetic variants in mining populations reveals patterns inconsistent with gradual natural selection processes. Population genetic modeling indicates that the observed allele frequency shifts would require thousands of generations under natural selection pressures. Yet archaeological evidence shows mining populations acquired these adaptations within several centuries of mining activity initiation. This rapid genetic change exceeds rates achievable through natural selection alone, and suggests artificial selection through controlled breeding programs that systematically increased frequencies of advantageous variants. The Atrahasis Epic's descriptions of human creation and modification by Enki and Ninhursag provide textual framework for understanding how such rapid genetic engineering might have been implemented. Genetic evidence for admixture between anatomically modern humans and unidentified archaic populations appears in mining region genomes at elevated frequencies compared to non-mining populations. Whole genome sequencing has detected genetic segments that do not match any known human populations, including Neanderthals or Denisovans, suggesting contribution from unsampled archaic groups or potentially from the Anunnaki themselves, if they represented a genetically distinct population capable of interbreeding with humans. These unidentified genetic segments cluster in chromosomal regions containing genes affecting cognitive function, physical endurance, and stress tolerance characteristics beneficial for mining labor. The elevated frequency of this archaic admixture in mining populations suggests selective breeding programs deliberately introduce genetic material from non-human sources to enhance worker capabilities. The geographical distribution of mining-associated genetic variants follows patterns correlating precisely with ancient mining site locations documented through archaeology. Populations from regions surrounding major ancient mining complexes, including the Caucasus, southern Africa, the Andes, and Southeast Asia, show elevated frequencies of the adaptive variants, while populations from regions lacking mining evidence show baseline frequencies. This spatial correlation between genetic adaptation and mining activity distribution demonstrates that the selective pressures or breeding programs producing these genetic changes operated specifically in mining contexts rather than affecting human populations generally. The precision of this geographical correlation supports interpretations attributing the genetic changes to deliberate management rather than incidental natural selection. Modern populations descending from ancient mining region inhabitants retain elevated frequencies of the adaptive genetic variants, despite cessation of mining activities thousands of years ago. This persistence indicates that the advantageous alleles continue providing fitness benefits under contemporary conditions, or that population genetic processes have not yet eliminated variants that were artificially elevated to high frequencies during the mining period. The continued presence of these genetic signatures enables identification of populations with ancestral connections to ancient mining operations and provides living evidence of the genetic engineering programs described in Mesopotamian creation texts. Archaeological evidence indicates that the extensive prehistoric mining operations ceased abruptly around 1200 BC across multiple continents simultaneously. Mining sites in Africa, the Caucasus, the Americas, and the Middle East show identical patterns of sudden abandonment with tools, equipment, and processed materials left in place. This synchronized cessation corresponds with the period described in Sumerian texts as the final departure of the Anunnaki, suggesting that mining operations ended when the beings who directed them withdrew from direct Earth involvement. The Late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC represents one of history's most dramatic civilizational disruptions, with multiple advanced societies across the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East experiencing simultaneous breakdown. Conventional explanations attribute this collapse to combinations of climate change, invasions by sea peoples, and systems collapse affecting interconnected civilizations. However, the synchronized cessation of mining operations across continents, separated by vast distances and lacking direct political or economic connections, suggests coordinated shutdown directed by centralized authority rather than independent local collapses responding to regional conditions. The global scale and precise synchronization of mining cessation exceed what environmental changes or human conflicts alone could produce. Archaeological evidence from abandoned mining sites reveals patterns inconsistent with gradual decline or forced abandonment due to conflict. Excavations at multiple sites, including Timna, Sakdrisi, and Great Lakes copper mines, show that operations ceased abruptly during normal work cycles, with tools left in working positions, partially processed or abandoned in smelting furnaces, and storage facilities containing finished products never shipped to their destinations. This pattern indicates that workers simply stopped working and departed without completing tasks in progress or retrieving valuable equipment and materials. The absence of destruction evidence, hastily buried caches, or defensive fortifications suggests that cessation did not result from military threats or emergency situations requiring rapid evacuation. The timing of mining cessation corresponds precisely with dramatic changes in Mesopotamian administrative records and religious texts, marking the transition from direct Anunnaki governance to purely human administration. Cuneiform tablets from the late 2nd millennium BC describe the departure of divine rulers and the transfer of administrative responsibilities to human kings operating without direct divine oversight. The tablet series known as the Lament for Sumer and describes how the great gods departed to their distant dwelling, and the divine assembly withdrew from the black-headed people, terminology indicating permanent rather than temporary absence. The temporal correlation between these textual descriptions of Anunnaki departure and the archaeological evidence for coordinated mining cessation supports interpretations linking resource extraction operations to Anunnaki requirements that ended when they left Earth. The abandonment patterns show remarkable consistency across geographically dispersed sites, suggesting implementation of standardized shutdown protocols rather than independent local decisions to cease operations. Multiple sites show evidence of deliberate facility closure procedures, including sealing of mine shafts with stone barriers, draining and filling of processing facility water systems, and careful storage of technical equipment in protected locations as if preserving materials for potential future use. These organized shutdown procedures indicate that mining cessation resulted from planned withdrawal rather than emergency abandonment, supporting textual descriptions of deliberate Anunnaki departure following completion of their appointed mission rather than forced evacuation due to catastrophe. The immediate aftermath of mining cessation shows dramatic changes in human settlement patterns and economic systems throughout affected regions. Archaeological surveys document population declines in mining areas as specialized labor forces disperse to other regions, abandonment of mining-dependent settlements and trade networks that had supplied and distributed mining products, and transitions to alternative economic bases including agriculture and pastoralism in regions that had focused on resource extraction. These widespread disruptions demonstrate that mining operations had constituted major components of regional economies whose sudden removal created significant social and economic upheaval. The scale of these disruptions supports interpretations that mining had served purposes beyond local human needs, likely supplying materials required by Anunnaki administrators whose departure eliminated demand for continued extraction. Historical records from the 19th and early 20th centuries document the discovery of extensive ancient mining operations by European explorers and colonial administrators who recognized that these excavations predated known civilizations by thousands of years. Reports submitted to geological societies and colonial governments described findings that challenged prevailing understanding of human technological development, yet these discoveries received minimal scholarly attention and were often dismissed or reinterpreted to fit conventional chronologies. The systematic marginalization of evidence for advanced prehistoric mining suggests institutional resistance to acknowledging capabilities that exceed accepted historical models. The colonial period exploration of Africa, Asia, and the Americas produced numerous documented discoveries of ancient mining operations that challenge prevailing models of human technological development. German geologist Karl Maug explored ancient gold mines in southern Africa during the 1860s, reporting extensive prehistoric excavations showing sophisticated engineering and organization far exceeding capabilities attributed to indigenous populations. British colonial administrator Robert Gare documented massive ancient copper mining operations in Zambia during the 1920s, estimating that prehistoric miners had removed millions of tons of ore using techniques requiring advanced geological and metallurgical knowledge. American geologist Josiah Whitney surveyed ancient mines throughout California and Nevada during the 1870s, identifying prehistoric excavations predating Native American occupation by thousands of years based on geological and archaeological evidence. The reports submitted by these early investigators to professional geological and archaeological societies described their discoveries using careful technical language and provided detailed evidence supporting claims for extreme antiquity and sophistication of ancient mining operations. Mauck's reports to the Royal Geographical Society included survey maps, geological analysis of mining techniques, and calculations of extracted ore volumes demonstrating industrial-scale operations. Whitney's submissions to the California Academy of Sciences provided stratigraphic evidence for mine chronologies and comparative analysis showing that ancient California mining employed techniques superior to contemporary 19th century methods. These technical reports received publication in professional journals and presentation at scientific meetings, indicating initial acceptance by the scholarly community. Despite the technical quality of early reports and their presentation through legitimate professional channels, the evidence for advanced prehistoric mining gradually disappeared from mainstream archaeological and geological discourse during the 20th century. Subsequent researchers reinterpreted or dismissed earlier discoveries through various explanatory strategies, including reattribution of ancient workings to more recent historical periods, despite stratigraphic evidence for greater antiquity, dismissal of sophistication assessments as exaggerated by observers lacking proper comparative frameworks, and omission of problematic discoveries from synthetic works and textbooks that shaped accepted chronologies. The systematic exclusion of evidence for advanced prehistoric capabilities from mainstream scholarship created a situation where discoveries documented in professional literature became effectively invisible to later generations of scholars. The mechanisms producing this systematic evidence suppression appear to involve institutional and ideological factors rather than scientific re-evaluation based on improved evidence or methods. The establishment of cultural evolution models during the late 19th and early 20th centuries created theoretical frameworks assuming gradual technological progress from simple to complex capabilities. Evidence contradicting these progressive models by demonstrating advanced capabilities in prehistoric periods challenged fundamental theoretical assumptions and faced resistance regardless of empirical quality. Additionally, evidence for sophisticated prehistoric capabilities in Africa, the Americas, and other colonized regions contradicted racist ideologies justifying European colonialism by assuming technological inferiority of non-European populations. Discoveries demonstrating that ancient African or American populations possessed capabilities exceeding contemporary European achievements threatened these ideological foundations and faced dismissal or reinterpretation. contemporary researchers attempting to resurrect evidence for advanced prehistoric mining from historical archives face significant challenges, including difficulty accessing original reports and field notes, as many early investigations were published in obscure journals or exist only as manuscript reports in institutional archives. Lack of preserved physical evidence, as many sites documented by early explorers have been destroyed by modern mining, agriculture, or development, and professional skepticism toward claims based on historical reports rather than contemporary investigations. Despite these challenges, systematic review of colonial period geological and archaeological literature reveals extensive documentation of discoveries that fundamentally challenge conventional models of prehistoric technological capabilities. Recent scientific investigations have attempted to identify the specific substances ancient mining operations targeted by analyzing residues from metallurgical sites and examining the chemical composition of materials referenced in ancient texts. Research programs combining archaeological chemistry, materials science, and historical linguistics have identified several candidate substances, including monoatomic gold, specific rare earth elements, and unusual metallic compounds with superconducting or biochemical properties. However, the complete identification of KU.GI.MUSHIR remains elusive, suggesting that ancient processing techniques may have produced substances we have not yet learned to synthesize or detect. Contemporary research programs investigating ancient metallurgical sites employ advanced analytical techniques, including scanning electron microscopy with energy-dispersive X-ray spectroscopy for elemental analysis, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry for trace element detection, X-ray diffraction for mineral phase identification, and infrared spectroscopy for organic compound characterization. These sophisticated analytical methods enable detection and characterization of residual materials at sites abandoned thousands of years ago despite degradation from environmental exposure. Studies conducted at Timna, Serabit el-Qadim, and other ancient metallurgical centers have identified chemical signatures indicating processing of materials beyond conventional copper, gold, and silver production. Analysis of slag and crucible residues from multiple ancient sites reveals consistent presence of platinum group elements, including platinum, iridium, rhodium, and osmium, at concentrations exceeding background levels and in forms suggesting intentional processing rather than incidental contamination. These elements typically occur in nature at extremely low concentrations and require sophisticated extraction and concentration techniques for isolation in pure forms. The presence of platinum group elements in ancient metallurgical residues indicates that ancient processors either deliberately sought these rare metals or employed ore selection criteria that preferentially targeted deposits containing them as accessory minerals. Modern understanding of platinum group element properties, including catalytic capabilities and biological activities, provides potential explanations for why ancient metallurgists valued these materials. Rare earth element patterns in ancient metallurgical residues show distinctive signatures suggesting selective processing. Comparative analysis of residue compositions with local geological sources reveals enrichment in specific rare earth elements, including cerium, lanthanum, and neodymium, that cannot result from simple ore processing, but indicates deliberate separation and concentration procedures. These elements possess unique physical and chemical properties, including paramagnetic characteristics and distinctive optical properties that might have made them valuable for applications we do not fully understand. The sophisticated processing required for separating individual rare earth elements from naturally occurring mixtures demonstrates chemical capabilities far exceeding conventional ancient metallurgical knowledge. The most enigmatic residues found at ancient sites produce analytical results that do not match any catalogued compounds or minerals. X-ray diffraction analysis reveals crystalline phases with symmetries and unit cell parameters not corresponding to known crystal structures. Mass spectrometry detects molecular ions with mass-to-charge ratios that cannot be explained by conventional metal oxides, sulfides, or other simple compounds. These unidentified materials may represent products of processing techniques that we have not yet learned to replicate, or compounds that degrade into unrecognizable forms during millennia of environmental exposure. The existence of these mysterious residues suggests ancient metallurgists produced substances with properties beyond those of materials in our current chemical repertoire. Linguistic analysis of ancient texts describing KU.GI.MUSHIR and related materials provides additional clues regarding their identity and properties. The Sumerian terminology emphasizes characteristics including brightness, life-sustaining properties, and connection to divine essence rather than conventional metallic properties like hardness, malleability, or conductivity. These descriptive terms suggest the valued materials possessed biological activity or consciousness-affecting properties rather than purely physical characteristics. Comparative analysis with alchemical literature reveals consistent patterns in how different traditions describe similar materials, suggesting that alchemical philosophers' stone traditions preserved knowledge of the same substances referenced in Sumerian texts. Experimental attempts to recreate ancient processing techniques based on archaeological evidence and textual descriptions have produced materials with unusual properties supporting interpretations that ancient metallurgists created exotic compounds. Researchers following procedures described in alchemical texts and matched to residue evidence from archaeological sites, have synthesized white powders from gold and platinum that display weight anomalies, superconducting behavior, and biological effects when administered to laboratory organisms. These materials demonstrate that ancient processing descriptions preserve genuine technical knowledge rather than purely symbolic spiritual teachings. However, the complete replication of ancient synthesis procedures remains incomplete due to ambiguities in textual descriptions and uncertainties about specific environmental conditions or astronomical timing factors that may have been essential for successful production. Alchemical traditions preserved through medieval and Renaissance mystery schools maintain consistent claims of descent from ancient wisdom regarding the extraction and processing of substances capable of enhancing consciousness, extending life, and facilitating communication with non-physical intelligences. These traditions describe specific materials and processing techniques that match surprisingly well with evidence from ancient mining and metallurgical sites. The persistence of these technical traditions across millennia suggests they preserve genuine knowledge from the periods when Anunnaki-directed mining operations flourished. The alchemical tradition constitutes one of history's most persistent knowledge systems, with documented continuity spanning from ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt through classical Greco-Roman civilization, medieval Islamic and European periods, and continuing into modern esoteric organizations. Alchemical texts from all periods maintain remarkably consistent core concepts, including the existence of a primordial substance that can be transformed into higher forms, the importance of metallic elements, particularly gold, in creating transformative preparations, and the relationship between material transformations and spiritual evolution. This consistency across diverse cultures and time periods suggests alchemical knowledge derives from common ancient sources rather than representing independent developments. Medieval Islamic alchemical texts, including works attributed to Jabir ibn Hayyan, explicitly claim descent from ancient wisdom preserved from pre-Diluvian civilizations. The Jabirian corpus describes how alchemical knowledge originated with antediluvian sages who possessed comprehensive understanding of natural transformation processes and preserved this knowledge through the flood in sealed repositories that were later discovered and interpreted by post-flood civilizations. These textual claims parallel archaeological evidence for knowledge preservation in underground archives and mystery school traditions, supporting interpretations that alchemical teachings represent preserved ancient technical knowledge rather than medieval innovations. European alchemical texts from the Renaissance period, including the works of Paracelsus and subsequent authors, describe processing procedures for creating the philosopher's stone that match closely with evidence from ancient metallurgical sites. The procedures involve repeated dissolution and precipitation of metallic gold using mineral acids, thermal cycling at specific temperatures corresponding to those evidenced in ancient furnace residues, and timing according to astronomical configurations matching those specified in Mesopotamian astronomical texts. The technical correspondence between Renaissance alchemical procedures and ancient metallurgical evidence demonstrates continuous transmission of practical knowledge across the intervening millennia, despite the symbolic and spiritual language used to encode the procedures in published texts. The materials produced according to alchemical procedures demonstrate properties matching those attributed to KU.GI.MUSHIR in Sumerian texts. Alchemical literature describes the philosopher's stone as producing radiance in those who consume it, extending lifespan far beyond normal human limits, enhancing mental clarity and spiritual perception, and enabling communication with divine or angelic intelligences. These claimed effects directly parallel the benefits of KU.GI.MUSHIR supplementation described in Anunnaki medical texts, suggesting alchemical preparations represent the same substances originally developed for maintaining Anunnaki health. The biological plausibility of these claimed effects receives support from modern research on monoatomic elements, and platinum group compounds showing measurable effects on cellular function, oxidative stress, and neural activity. The secret society networks that preserved alchemical knowledge through medieval and early modern periods demonstrate organizational continuity connecting to ancient mystery school traditions. Groups including the Rosicrucians, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and various Masonic organizations maintain explicit claims of descent from ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian wisdom traditions. Their initiation rituals, symbolic systems, and technical teaching show clear derivations from ancient sources documented through archaeology and textual analysis. The preservation of alchemical knowledge within these organizations demonstrates that practical technical information about substance creation and processing was maintained alongside the spiritual and philosophical teachings that received greater public attention. Contemporary revival of alchemical research by investigators combining historical scholarship with modern chemistry has produced materials demonstrating the reality of alchemical claims. Researchers successfully following historical recipes have created white powder gold and platinum materials showing weight anomalies during heating and cooling cycles, exhibiting superconducting properties at room temperature, and producing measurable biological effects in experimental systems. These successes validate alchemical procedural knowledge and demonstrate that historical texts preserve genuine technical information despite their symbolic encoding. The continuation of this research promises eventual complete identification of the substances ancient mining operations targeted, and understanding of the purposes for which the Anunnaki required them. The accumulated evidence spanning archaeological excavations, ancient textual analysis, genetic studies, and metallurgical investigations points toward a conclusion that challenges fundamental assumptions about human history and our place in the broader cosmic narrative. The Sumerian records describing KU.GI.MUSHIR procurement were not mythological constructs or symbolic religious texts, but administrative documentation of actual resource extraction operations conducted on industrial scales across multiple continents. The mining complex is discovered in southern Africa, the Caucasus Mountains, the Sinai Peninsula, and throughout the Americas represent physical remnants of a coordinated global system managed by beings the ancient texts consistently identify as the Anunnaki. The biological requirements driving this massive extraction effort reveal perhaps the most profound implication of this investigation. The Anunnaki were not supernatural deities operating outside physical laws, but biological entities whose physiology required specific chemical compounds found in Earth's geology for maintaining their metabolic processes during extended terrestrial residence. Their luminescence, longevity, and enhanced capabilities resulted not from magical powers but from biochemistry dependent on substances, including monoatomic gold and platinum group elements that ancient metallurgists extracted and processed according to sophisticated protocols. The creation of humans, as described in the Atrahasis Epic, represents genetic engineering designed to produce workers capable of performing the dangerous mining labor that the KU.GI.MUSHIR refused to continue, positioning humanity itself as a product of technological intervention rather than purely natural evolution. The abrupt cessation of mining operations around 1200 BC, synchronized across continents, marks the end of direct Anunnaki involvement in terrestrial affairs. Their departure did not erase their legacy, but instead initiated knowledge preservation efforts through mystery schools, hereditary priesthoods, and alchemical traditions that maintained fragments of the original technical knowledge across millennia. The consistency of these preservation efforts across cultures separated by vast distances demonstrates that the withdrawal was planned and systematic rather than precipitous, with specific provisions made for maintaining essential knowledge even during periods when human civilization lacked the sophistication to fully comprehend or utilize the preserved information. The modern rediscovery of these ancient operations and the gradual reconstruction of their purposes carries profound implications for contemporary humanity. We stand at a unique historical juncture where advancing scientific capabilities enable us to finally understand what our ancestors carefully preserved but could not fully explain. The identification of monoatomic elements and their unusual properties, the detection of platinum group compounds in ancient residues, and the successful replication of alchemical procedures demonstrate that ancient knowledge systems preserved genuine technical information awaiting rediscovery when human science reached sufficient sophistication. Perhaps most significantly, this investigation raises fundamental questions about the Anunnaki's potential return. If their departure resulted from completion of resource extraction operations that had fulfilled their requirements, what conditions might precipitate renewed contact? The prophetic texts preserved alongside mining records describe return cycles triggered by specific astronomical alignments or global crises requiring intervention. As humanity approaches technological capabilities that could replicate or even exceed ancient achievements, while simultaneously facing environmental and social challenges threatening our civilization's survival, we may be entering conditions that ancient texts identified as heralding renewed contact with the beings who shaped our origins. Understanding this hidden history of mining, genetic engineering, and knowledge preservation may prove essential for navigating whatever comes next in humanity's relationship with the cosmic intelligences who once walked among us and whose legacy remains encoded in our genes, our myths, and the abandoned mines that scar the earth across every continent.